We are rolling. Let's start.
We're ready.
All right. The regular session of Roanoke City Council for May the 18th, 2020 at 2 p.m. is hereby called to order. Participation by electronic communication pursuant to Amendment 28 to House Bill 29, Section 2.2-3708 2A, Code of Virginia, 1950 as amended. Ordinance number 41703, 032720, and resolution number 41704, 032720. At this time, I'll ask our clerk, Ms. Susie McCord, to please call the roll.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Here.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Here.
Ms. Davis,
Here.
Ms. Osborne,
Here.
Ms. Price, Ms. White Boyd,
Here.
and Mayor Lee.
Here. Please note that Councilwoman Anita Price will not be in attendance at our 2 p.m. session today. We do have a quorum, and which is present by electronic communications, and we declare that a quorum is present and permitted by Amendment 28, House Bill 29, 2020 session, Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708 and 15.2-1413. All right, I will provide the invocation today, and following, we will all join together for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in prayer. Eternal God, our Father, we come to you this afternoon, thanking you for this opportunity that you have given us, both elected and appointed officials, to come together to discuss the business of this city. We thank you for how you watched over this entire ballot and protected us from seen and unseen danger. And Lord, we say a special prayer for those who are sick in our community. We ask you to bless those on this council that have relatives or family members that are ill. We ask you to strengthen them and go with them at this time and let them know that with you, nothing is impossible. So we thank you. And Lord, we ask that as we go through business today, that you give us the wisdom and understanding that we need to make those decisions that are best for this city. But continue to give us the spirit of cooperation, the spirit of respect, and the spirit of caring for one another. We give you praise, we give you honor, and we recognize your presence. It is in that high and holy name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the
To the
flag
flag of the United States of America and to the
And
republic
to the republic
for which it stands,
for
one nation,
one
under
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all. For all.
Thank you so much. And welcome to our session for May 18th. Let me say today's council meeting will be televised live and replayed on RB TV Channel 3 on Thursday, May 21st at 7 o'clock p.m. and Saturday, May 23rd at 4 o'clock p.m. and video stream through Facebook Live at facebook.com/Roanoke, Virginia, Roanoke, VA, .council meetings. No, Roanoke, I'm sorry, facebook.com/Roanoke, VA. Council meetings are offered with closed captioning for the hearing impaired. Each member of council has access through the Zoom meeting platform and can participate in this proceeding. The city has provided the public with information to allow the public access to observe this regular session through live broadcast on RVTV, live streaming on Facebook, and posted on YouTube. The city has provided notice of this agenda and process to the public on Thursday, May the 15th, 2020. The city staff, including the city manager, city clerk, city attorney, and technical staff, are present in the council chamber and are participating in this regular session. To facilitate the process today, to ensure that all council members and the public can follow these proceedings, I ask that whenever a member speaks, including making a motion, to first state the member's name, then make the motion or second. At this time, I will ask members whether they have any questions about this process. If not, I ask the city manager to advise us if he has any comments. Hearing none, we'll move now to item number 2, which is the presentations and acknowledgements, and we have none. Item number 3 is the hearing of citizens upon public matters. City Council sets this time as a priority for citizens to be heard. All matters will be referred to the city manager for response, recommendation, or report to council as he may deem appropriate. And based upon Executive Order number 51, issued by Governor Northam on March 12, 2020, amended Executive Order number 53 on April 15, 2020, Executive Order number 55, issued by Governor Northam on March 30, 2020, and as amended, Executive Order number 61, issued by Governor Northam on May 8, 2020. Amendment 28 to House Bill 29, adopted April 22nd, 2020. Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2. Virginia Code Section 15.2-1413. Ordinance number 41703-032720, and resolution number 41704-032720. City Council will be conducting this regular session of City Council by electronic communication means without a quorum of City Council physically present in the council chamber and without the presence of members of the public in the City Council chamber. In order to afford citizens an opportunity to provide comments to City Council during the COVID-19 pandemic disaster, citizens wishing to address the council during this regular session of City Council conducted by electronic communication means were instructed to sign up by mailing or by emailing or by calling the city's clerk's office at clerk@roanokeva.gov. And the number was 540-853-2541 by 12 p.m. today, May 18th. Those citizens who have signed up to speak before the council have been provided the Zoom meeting information and will be allowed to join the meeting and address City Council by electronic communication means. At this time, I will ask our clerk to advise us if any citizens have signed up to be heard.
Yes, we have one speaker, and that is Ken McLeod.
All right. All right, welcome, Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, members of the City Council, for hearing me today. I want to thank the City of Roanoke for listening to the many people who advocated for the reopening of the Greenway system. I hope that the phased reopening of the Lick Run Greenway, the Garden City Greenway, and the Tinker Creek Greenway was successful and without crowding over this weekend, and that people continue to be responsible as the Roanoke River Greenway reopens this week. Roanoke's Greenway system is incredibly important because it is a place that is consistently safe and available for biking, walking, and other physical activity. Last Friday, unfortunately, we were reminded of how dangerous Roanoke's roads and sidewalks can be, particularly for people outside of cars. The same day that people protested the sentence of the driver who hit and killed Linda Pearson, there was a person hit on Orange Avenue and 2 people hit on Brandon Avenue. These events highlight the dangers that the people of Roanoke face due to streets that prioritize cars and speed. While there are many places where Roanoke can improve road safety, I'd like to talk about Brandon Avenue today. Brandon Avenue was identified as a priority corridor in Roanoke's 2012 bicycle plan and for several pedestrian improvements in the 2015 pedestrian plan. As a corridor, the area from Main Street to Franklin Street sees multiple crashes per year, including a fatality last year. Brandon Avenue is currently scheduled to be repaved this summer, but repaving plans have not been made public. It is not uncommon for roads to go 10 or 20 years between repaving. If the city is not considering a larger redesign of Brandon Avenue and does not foresee one during the next comprehensive plan, then this summer's repaving is the best and perhaps only chance to improve safety on the corridor. If the city wants to hold itself to its goals for the future, ensuring health and safety, providing high livability and quality of life, and promoting sustainable growth, then the city should use the opportunity of repaving the street to show how these goals can be applied to Brandon Avenue. By adding buffered bike lanes and a center turn lane, Brandon Avenue can serve more people and be safer for everyone who uses it. A more multimodal Brandon Avenue can make Howard a stronger destination, sustainably woven into the surrounding neighborhoods and inviting people who enjoy Roanoke's outdoors to explore more of the city. With the repaving of Brandon Avenue this summer, the city can take a step towards a safer, more multimodal future, as its comprehensive plan envisions, or perpetuate a dangerous design. I hope that the city carefully considers the opportunity presented by repaving and takes every step possible to ensure that what happens this summer is a step towards Roanoke's future. At the very least, the city should study multimodal improvements for Brandon Avenue and allow public comment on its repaving plan. Thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you, Mr. Cloud. And what we'll do, we'll ask our city manager to respond to the concerns that you have regarding Brandon Avenue and to make sure that you'll get that. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for listening.
All right, our next agenda item is the consent agenda. And all matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by members of City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussions of the items. If discussion is desired, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. There's one request for the closed meeting from the city attorney for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual litigation where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body. Pursuant to section 2.2-3711 A7 Code of Virginia as amended. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Juna Osborne, so moved.
Joe Bestfitch, I second.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Osborne,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
and Mayor Lee.
Aye. Thank you. And the consent agenda has been approved. Moving now to a regular agenda. We have no public hearings today. Item number 6 is petitions and communications. We have requests of the Roanoke Valley Resource Authority to present its proposed 2020-2021 annual budget. Daniel D. Miles, Chief Executive Officer, spokesperson. Present its proposed 2020-2021 annual budget. All right, I think my boys have caught up with me now. All right, sponsored by the city manager. Let's say Mr. Miles, Chief Executive Officer, is available by phone. He's not presenting a presentation, but he's available to answer any questions that we may have. Mr. Miles, are you there?
I am, yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like for you, is there anything you want to say to the council before we move to adopt?
Nothing particular other than just thank you for your consideration of the Resource Authority's annual budget. As you know, we normally have that already presented to City Council by this time each year. Due to the circumstances this year, we did request and receive an extension of our submittal deadline. So we're trying to get that to you, but as you well know, pretty much all of our budgets are in a state of flux. I would say it's kind of a holding budget that is presented to you. And as we get into the fiscal year and start to uncover all of the things that are going to be impacting our operation in the fiscal year, there may be some follow-up changes to the budget that our board will have to react to as we determine a little bit better what those needs are.
Okay. All right. There's a resolution.
Bill Bestfitch, I move the resolution.
Michelle Davis.
All right. I didn't hear that. There's a sort of a, my sound is not all together, but we'll continue to do the best we can. Madam Clerk, can you read the title paragraph?
A resolution approving the annual budget of the Roanoke Valley Resource Authority for fiscal year 2020 through 2021 upon certain terms and conditions.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of council? All right, Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Ms. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Ms. Osborne?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mayor Lee?
Aye. And the vote is made and the resolution passes. I'm hearing an echo. Are you all getting echoes? It sounds like I'm hearing my voice 2 or 3 times, but maybe it's wrong. I don't know if anything can be done about it, but I just want to let you all know that. All right. We're now down to item number 7, which is report of city officers and comments of the city manager. We have briefings, and let me just state that we'll follow the same method that we used at our last meeting. Before the city manager makes his, let me say something before he does that. I want to ask everybody to hold their questions. The presentation will have a break, and at such time, I will ask each council member in alphabetical order for their questions and comments. This time I'll start with Ms. Trish Whiteboard, and then I'll go all the way down the line. All right, so please right now to introduce the city manager to introduce the briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm going to just do a quick introduction to the budget proposal and then turn it over to Amelia so that she can walk you through the presentation. And then, of course, we will pause and answer any questions that you may have regarding the information that we present. As a consequence of slowing economic activity due to COVID-19 related business closures, and just as with the FY20 budget, we anticipate, and we have shared this with you certainly over several briefings, a related reduction in revenues to be received. We'll offer more details, of course, about these further in the presentation. However, with that in mind, I don't want us to lose sight that we will continue to invest nearly $300 million back into the community, and we will still advance toward our community vision with a focus on our strategic priorities. This budget has a particular emphasis on preserving essential services and the staff that deliver those, assisting the vulnerable in our community, supporting economic recovery, and reclaiming momentum and strengthening our resiliency as we go forward. We will continue to make capital investments, in this case, in this year, to the tune of more than $28 million. Between the end of FY20 and the beginning of FY21, we expect to see revenues reduced by nearly $12 million over that which was originally budgeted for FY20 to a level less than that was actually received in FY19. And of course, we expect unavoidable costs to continue to increase. Still, we will do all that I just mentioned with a balanced budget with no increases in the tax rate nor in fees. Finally, we present a budget that prepares us should there be even further revenue reductions in FY21 or even possibly into FY22. We have accomplished this by establishing a COVID contingency fund, preserving our reserves, and maintaining availability of any federal or state aid funds that we may receive, all allowing us maximum ability to adapt to changing conditions and be able to support our local economic recovery. None of what I just shared with you, of course, would be possible without the professionalism and dedication of Amelia Merchant and her staff. Of particular note has been R.B. Lawhorn, who has done the yeoman's work associated with what you have and what you'll hear from today. This group has managed to help shore up an FY20 budget that literally changed overnight while building an FY21 budget essentially twice. And all of this was being done while most of them worked safely from remote locations. Similarly, this would not have been possible without the support of our division and department directors, appointed officials, and constitutional officers who helped determine the most effective way to balance the budget and deliver essential services. Finally, this would not happen without the leadership provided by you, the mayor and council, in establishing and maintaining a consistent focus on strategic priorities that will ensure that we manage to get through this current challenge and position ourselves for a stronger future. Thank you for your help as we've crafted, again, what amounts to really 3 budgets in a matter of 2 months, as we've gone through trying to wrap up FY20 in some sort of reasonable way and then rebuild FY21 after we had already worked on that piece. So I very much appreciate the assistance and the patience that everyone has exhibited. And I'm going to turn it over so that Amelia can walk you through what is included in the proposal. And then again, we'll answer any questions that you all might have as we go through this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Lee and members of City Council, we come before you today to present the fiscal year 2021 recommended budget, which has been prepared in keeping with the vision of the city as a safe, caring, and economically vibrant community on slide 2, in which to live, learn, grow, play, and prosper. Despite the challenges that we have, as well as others nationally, we are facing, we continue to strive to honor this vision in all that we do and all that we plan to do. Slide 3 shows us that as we follow the defined vision of the city, there are also 7 priorities which have been used for numerous years as approved by City Council. They've been used to develop and discuss the operating and capital budgets. Those priorities shown here provide the basis for considerations for use of funding and performance metrics by which we measure the success of our actions. Slide 4 shows us that the recommended budget is balanced at $298,065,000. That is a decrease of approximately 0.5% or 1.37 million. Despite the reduced level, the priorities established by City Council of Education, including support of Roanoke City Public Schools, community safety, human services, infrastructure, livability, good government, and economy are protected. The balanced budget also accounts for the necessity of the creation of a COVID-19 contingency of approximately 1.75 million to protect against further revenue contraction. On slide 5, we see the local taxes for the city of Roanoke, which total 67.7% of the total budget. This percentage stresses the importance of how these local taxes perform. Further, if we look at the percentage provided by real estate tax, 44.95%, sales tax, 10.48%, and personal property tax, 11.74%, those three local taxes alone equal approximately 65% of all local taxes. Again, we can see how much we are reliant upon the performance of our local taxes to perform well. On slide 6, since the month of March, we have discussed the impact of COVID-19 on local tax projections for the current fiscal year, as well as projections of impacts for fiscal 21. For fiscal 20, we anticipate local taxes not reaching the budgeted estimate by 4.25%, or perhaps as much as $9 million. This lowered expected performance of local taxes continuing into the first, second, and perhaps even the third and fourth quarters of fiscal 21. The projected decrease in local taxes in the recommended budget is 1.15%, or $2.3 million lower than the fiscal 20 adopted levels. Slide 7. We see that the estimates have been finalized in other categories as well and result in a total revenue expectation of $298,065,000, which is $1.4 million lower than the adopted fiscal 20 adopted budget. That is attributed mainly to the anticipated local tax contraction. On slide 8, it is critical to use the best practice of identifying and following guiding principles for budget preparation. Our guiding principles are noted here on this slide. We start with the priorities set by council. Due to COVID-19, we must anticipate and recognize the impact on local taxes. Despite the volume of requests, we must fund the highest base and supplemental priority services and programs. Next, the non-discretionary cost increases must be recognized. Following those increases, we consider prioritization of remaining base and supplemental services and programs. Those base services and programs which were not deemed priority, you will see as reflected is reduced or proposed reductions in the coming slides. Lastly, noted here, but certainly critical as we recognize the uncertainty due to COVID-19, the creation of a COVID-19 contingency in the event that, despite our responsive revenue estimations, tax performance worsens even more. On slide 9, what you find as we review these programs and services which are included in the recommended budget, as well as supplemental funding, is an emphasis on the following: essential services to the community, assisting the vulnerable in our community, supporting the economic recovery that we desire, and reclaiming the momentum our community has been blessed to experience, as well as strengthening our ability to be resilient in the face of an economic challenge. Slide 10 shows us that in keeping with the 7 priorities, as well as funding for Roanoke City Public Schools, reserved allocations, external agencies, and the COVID-19 contingency, you see the financial and percentage allocations to each priority. Again, as we look at the allocation to Roanoke City Public Schools and adding community safety, those 2 priority areas alone equal over 51% of our available sources of funding. Each of the priority areas will be presented briefly in the order of largest allocation, starting with education on slide 11. Each of our priority areas are formatted in this manner today. Programs and services which are continuing, supplemental funding, reductions, and notes of any impacts to personnel. These slides are meant to only be representative of some of the most significant in each area. Following the presentation, the recommended budget will be available and shares all of the services and programs included in the fiscal 21 budget. In the education priority, we continue support of Roanoke City Public Schools based on the formula, which provides 40% of adjusted local taxes. Due to the local tax expectation, the recommended allocation for RCPS is lowered by $557,884 from the fiscal 20 adopted budget level. That level will be $82.8 million that is included in the recommended budget. Also, the main library operations are recommended to be sustained, however, with a closing time of 6 p.m. This will result in a decrease in expenditures for part-time expenses. Continuing on slide 12 with community safety as our next priority, it continues to support the numerous areas as you see noted here for this priority. Several areas also require supplemental funding. 2 of the items noted, listed here with asterisks, the Gun Violence Task Force and Police High Visibility Safety Vests will be funded from a one-time source. In subsequent slides, as you see asterisks, those also indicate funding from one-time sources. On slide 13, there are reductions proposed in the community safety priority as well. That is inclusive of deer culling, stipends for General District Court and Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court, as well as police administrative support. The personnel impacts within this priority involve the unfunding of 5 vacant positions. And as we go forward, all of the personnel impacts that we will note for you today involve vacant positions. Slide 14 takes us to the human services priority. The human services priority moves forward in the recommended budget with all services and programs intact, a supplemental increase for cremation assistance, and no impacts to personnel. Slide 15 begins infrastructure. This priority moves forward with critical services and programs impacting the community and internal infrastructure operations supported as well. On slide 16, supplemental funding is provided for critical technology operations, and there are reductions in continuing programs and services that are impacting our community, such as alley maintenance, fleet capital, paving, and snow removal chemicals. Again, these programs are continuing. However, the recommendation is that these programs continue at a lowered level. The personnel impact is 6 vacant positions. On slide 17, in the livability priority, we continue support of critical community services and programs and add supplemental funding for key areas such as library maintenance and recycling fees. 4 supplementals are providing support through one-time sources. Slide 18 continues the livability priority. Reductions have impact on the community. The recommended budget proposes the closure of pools for 2 seasons, eliminates 1 full day of operations at branch library locations, and the elimination of administrative support for recreation clubs. The personnel impact in the livability priority involves 2 vacant full-time positions and reduction in part-time expenditures as well. Slide 19 takes us forward to the good government priority. The good government priority continues support of all general government administrative offices, elections, assessment, collections, and financial support, as well as continued support of the lien program. Supplemental funding is included for property insurance and the tax treasury project, as well as one-time support as necessary for elections and registrar operations. The personnel impact in this priority involves 2 vacant positions. Slide 20, the economy priority, as well as others, continue services and program support for key areas, as well as supplemental funding for enterprise zones. One-time funding is planned to support the COVID-19 Recovery Fund, Financial Stability Program Specialist, and the Microloan Program. Reductions in performance agreements is strictly based on the anticipated local tax performance. The personnel impact in the economy priority will involve the unfunding of a vacant position. Slide 21 presents the reserved allocations component of the budget, and this envelops items which are administrative necessary, such as subsidies, contingencies, debt service, reserve funding, and residual fringe benefits. Supplemental funding is included for debt service for both the general fund and the Civic Center, as well as worker compensation. The GRTC subsidy is included as at a reduced funding level for fiscal 2021. Moving forward to slide 22 and subsequent slides presents the external agencies. External agency support included in the recommended budget totals $8.672 million and is noted for agencies listed on slides 22 and 23. We'll note that the support provided for the external agencies is almost 3% of the total budget for the city. Continues on slide 23. Slide 24 provides information regarding supplemental funding for external agencies. That supplemental funding totals approximately $182,000, the majority of which is budgeted for Roanoke Center for Animal Control and Protection, Blue Ridge Behavioral Health Care, the Health Department, Hotel Roanoke Conference Center and Commission, 1% sales tax, and the Small Business Development Center. Slide 25 presents also reductions for external agencies. As we discussed throughout the 7 priority areas, reductions were necessary to not only balance the budget, but to also create the COVID-19 contingency. Besides the formula-driven reduction for Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge, reductions total approximately $377,000. This concludes the presentation of the allocations to the priority areas, reserved allocations, and external agencies necessary to balance the budget. Next, we turn to the capital improvement program. Slide 26. Each year, we review the capital improvement program, which spans 5 years. Our review is inclusive of the necessary projects, how they may be funded, and the impact of those projects on the operating budget. The investments that we make in those projects are governed by the debt policy and the required debt service over time. Slide 27 allows us today to present to you the recommended capital improvement program, which totals $112.9 million. Each year with the adopted budget, we present the 5-year program and ask council to approve the first year of that program. In some of these years, budgeted excess debt service may be available for one-time capital needs, the undesignated fund balance, and the stabilization reserve. For fiscal 2021, the projects include numerous items totaling $28.2 million. From the RCPS school and field house improvements, Main Street Wasena Bridge improvements, Parks and Recreation Master Plan, Berglund Center improvements, stormwater improvements, curb gutter and sidewalk improvements, fleet capital replacements, revenue system and digital radio conversion, public works service center improvements, LED lighting, HVAC and roof replacement within buildings, Campbell Court improvements, and the transit transfer facility. There are numerous exciting capital projects to pursue and move forward with in fiscal 2021. That concludes the presentation of the operating and capital improvement program for fiscal 21, and we'll pause at this point for questions.
All right, thank you, Amelia. And we'll begin with Councilwoman Whiteboard. If you have anything to...
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, really, Amelia, you do an amazing job. I wish I had you as a finance instructor when I was in college. I would probably gotten this a long time ago, but you took every aspect of this budget and broke it down, so I was able to follow it and understand that. And you made me think I'm a lot smarter than maybe I really am, but you did an excellent job. I appreciate that. I would say that it's amazing how you and your staff were able to get us in line and get us budgeted with a decrease of less than 0.5%. I really am amazed at the work that you guys have done. I will also say thank you to those department heads and the other managers who helped us to reach our budget, to get balanced by giving up some of their positions or whatever it was that they had to do. I certainly want to say thank you to all of them, because I know we all had to make some sacrifices, so I would like to thank them as well. But again, thank you to you and your staff. You did an amazing job. Your pie charts and all of that is just helped me a lot. So I'm not one of the veteran members of council, so I'm not speaking from them. I'm speaking for me. I'm just saying thank you for making my job easier. I appreciate this. It's an excellent budget presentation, and I will let some of the other members have their say. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I will now move on to Councilwoman Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. Thank you, Amelia, for all of your hard work. This is makes me appreciate your department even more than I already did. And I just wanted to say that I also appreciate the financial stability that City of Roanoke had been able to maintain and recover from 2008 that brought us to where we are right now, which I hope has made your job a little bit easier, that we had that stability to be able to make these shifts and changes that are necessary to carry us into the next several years. I did have a couple of questions. One thing, just regarding the elimination of a branch for the libraries, the elimination of one day at a branch location. How long are those anticipated to last until we can financially recover to reopen or reestablish those services?
Yeah, I'll let Amelia off the hook in answering that one. I would say, at a minimum, it's going to be for the fiscal year. Obviously, After that, as we go into FY22 preparation, we'll have to evaluate again where we stand at that point. But at a minimum, I would anticipate it for the full year.
Okay, thank you. And then I just wanted to appreciate the fact that there have been no full-time positions that have been cut, only vacant positions. I really appreciate that effort to really reserve the employment of our city employees. I wrote some other things down, but I cannot find them at this moment. So I'll pass along to my other council members. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I will go now to Councilwoman Davis.
Thank you so much. Amelia, thank you for all of your work on this. I know that it has been extremely difficult. We're trying to wrap up a budget and create a brand new budget all at the same time, all while not knowing what the future actually holds at all. So thank you all. I know that this is a best guess in many instances, and it's a well-educated guess, and it's well-informed, and yet we still really have no idea what's gonna happen and what's to come. And I've seen that in my own budgeting, trying to figure out what the next 9 months looks like, and 2 years and 3 years beyond that is extremely difficult right now. So thank you all for putting this together in a format that's consumable, that gives us guidance that we know we can use as a guiding document, and that helps, I hope, alleviate some of the fears that people have had over what the next couple of years may look like here in the city. I really appreciate that we've managed to save jobs. And I know too that the vacant spots that are not going to be filled are in a lot of departments, that's going to come as not as a shock, but that some people are going to be disappointed that even vacant spots that are now not going to be filled are going to continue not to be filled. That increases workload on other people. And we do recognize the difficulty associated with that as well. I wanted to ask a question, and then I'm probably going to save the rest of my questions for the very end and any kind of wrap up. But we did talk, you mentioned in the presentation about closing the pools for 2 seasons. And this may be more for Mr. Cow, Amelia, than for you, because it's really a maintenance question. But how is that going to affect, those 2 pools were already in somewhat disrepair. We knew that they were going to need some major renovations within the next couple of years. And I'm wondering what not using them for 2 years and letting them sit dry is going to do to the ongoing maintenance. And just trying to forecast, are we going to see 2 pools that are never going to reopen if we choose not to open them for 2 seasons based on financial need?
Yeah, the 2 pools actually won't be able to actually exist dry. So we actually have to keep water in them to a certain degree. They have to continue to be treated, chemically, just not the same as we would if we were operating them. So there is still some, if you will, sunk costs associated with just having those, and we'll continue to invest in those. If you noted in one of the items that was a supplemental item that has been recommended for funding that Amelia mentioned, it had to do with one of the larger repairs with one of the pools. So that will still have to occur. So we are still, though, from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, that in that plan, there is identification of the need to replace one or both of the pools at some point as we move forward. We're still assuming, even if we are able to do that in the sometime in the future, we're still going to have to rely on these two pools for some period of time. So no, we'll continue to actually keep them in operating condition, and they'll be ready to go as soon as the funding enables us to move in that direction. I should also say as well, and some of you already know this, that we have been approached by a couple of individuals as well as organizations that have some interest in potentially raising funds separate and apart from our funds that might enable the operation of the pools, not this season, but next season. And so we'll continue to have those conversations with them as well.
Well, and that was a little bit of what prompted this. I think that's one thing that really stands out to me personally, because Boys and Girls Club takes kids to Fallon Park every Friday during the summer. And that is such an important part of the summer experience. And I know that, right now we're in a position where we're not even certain we're going to be allowed to have 50 people gathered together. And so opening a pool for only 10 people certainly doesn't make a lot of sense. And yet when, it comes July, August, and we're trying to get kids out and active and give them opportunities outside of their homes, which are really critically important, especially during the summer. I am worried that we won't have that opportunity for our kids. So I do, Bob, and we can talk about this separate from this meeting, but have also spoken with Doug Fonder, who operated the Fallon Park pool. He reached out and had offered up some supplemental, I think, conditional funding as well. And so insofar as paying for chemicals and some things that maybe weren't in the original contract, that I think would at least be worth looking into, just for, like I said, the health and safety of our kids this summer and next summer. So that continued conversation would be appreciated if there is an opportunity again that somebody or some groups may be willing to step up and help pay for that. You know, it is free, not free, but it is low cost access for the majority of the kids who live in Roanoke City. And during the summer, a lot of our kids don't have any other options for swimming and for getting outside and for staying cool. So I think my other biggest concern was the GRTC reduction in subsidy. And are you able to speak to that a little bit, Bob?
I'll start, and I'll actually ask Sherman if he'll add more information to it. I mean, one of the good, I guess if there's a good thing, I suppose, coming out of the assistance that we're receiving in terms of COVID assistance is that quite a bit of funding actually was made available for transit operations while we go through this recovery period. And so there is at least initially some reductions that we can make off of our budget that will actually not necessarily immediately impact the service level because of those. At some point, though, those funds presumably will run out, and then there will be a service impact associated with it. And I'm going to let Sherman talk about what that impact may be when we get to that point associated with those dollars.
The reduction in the subsidy pertains to peak service, and peak service is basically the 30-minute headway that is maintained during 3 hours during the AM peak period and 3 hours during the afternoon and evening peak period. As a part of the comprehensive operational analysis, and also as a part of the transit development plan, which was adopted by the GRTC board, it was recommended that the peak service hours be reallocated to new services, more specifically to new routes. So the reduction in the subsidy would basically eliminate or mitigate the ability to reallocate those peak hours to new routes. As the city manager just indicated, as a result of the CARES Act funding, the peak service will remain intact for the coming fiscal year and will not be eliminated until fiscal year 21-22. What this reduction essentially does is it completely eliminates the ability or the planned transition from reallocating the peak service hours to new routes. That will be an item for future consideration that would require additional funding to facilitate that.
Thank you, Mr. Stovall. I appreciate that explanation, and it's good to see you. I hope you're well. Mayor, I think that concludes my questions for now. I'm not promising it's all my questions, but it concludes my questions for now.
Okay, Vice Mayor Combs.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. A couple questions. On the closing of the main library at 6 o'clock, could we just get some clarification on what change that indicates? How many nights is the main library currently open past 6? And would this just be for the coming fiscal year and then reevaluated?
2 hours.
Yes.
So 6 hours.
So right now, that would affect 3 evenings, and currently those evening hours go till 8 o'clock, correct? So we're going from 8 o'clock to 6 p.m. on those 3 evenings. And again, what that does for us is it reduces, one, the usage is not as heavy during those hours because the usage is heavier during the middle of the day there. and it allows us to reduce the hourly wages that go to that. It would still enable us in any of the other branches, because we still operate evening hours at all of the other branches, so we would still be able to pick up those services associated with it. And I know one of the other items, I know you didn't ask this particular question, but obviously one of the other proposed reductions deals with that 1 day of elimination as well. That will be 1 day across the entire system. So what we'll be looking for is the day in which, and this is only for the branches, not for the main library, the day in which they receive the least amount of traffic, and that will be the day that will be selected as the day that will be eliminated. And again, that will not affect the main library. So say, for example, as we have talked, that ends up being Saturdays, that means the main library will be the library that is open on Saturdays, and the other branches would be closed at that time.
So that will vary according to the branch then, depending on their traffic?
No, it'll be across the entire system. So what we'll do is, rather than having different days for different branches, it will be uniform across the entirety.
Okay.
With those. We just I don't know right now. I'm suspecting that Saturday across all the branches is the lightest day. But until we actually go through that process to determine if that's the case, I don't know for certain, but I'm assuming that would be the case.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit under community safety, the reduction of the stipends for general district and juvenile domestic
Sure.
court, just so the public
So
knows?
for several years, the city through an MOU has had an agreement to where they will further supplement the salaries of the clerks that are in those positions by defined amounts within those. The MOU, which I think dates back to 2014, somewhere in that time frame, carries with it a stipulation that that is based upon two things occurring. One is funding being available, and the second is that there are pay increases granted to all city employees. And the reason it's treated as a stipend, it's not a change in their annual salary. It is a one-time payout to them as they go along, but it carries with it those two stipulations, again, if you will. The MOU will remain in place so that if in FY22, those two measures are met again, to where we have the funds available and we're providing a salary increase across the entirety of the organization, then we again would honor the agreement that's covered within that MOU.
Okay. Just two other things briefly. Under external agencies, there are two organizations that have an asterisk by their title, Harrison and the CoLab. I wondered what that asterisk stands for.
Yeah, those asterisks, and it is true throughout the entire document, you'll see asterisk. Those are denoting that they come from one-time sources currently. So that currently we have an agreement with Center in the Square that has two components to it. One of those is an operating subsidy for the entire museum, if you will, or the entire operation. The other is that we pay rent for the Harrison Museum. What we're doing in this case is we're paying the rent for the Harrison Museum just like we normally would, except the source of funding is from a one-time source. The significance of that is in FY22, that means in order for us to continue doing that, we need to find money out of the general fund that we'll be able to put into place. But that allowed us to relieve a little bit of pressure off of the general fund for this particular instance. On the CoLab, the CoLab has really kind of two funding components. One is a subsidy for the CoLab, which right now is at $25,000. And then if you'll recall, there was an event called the City Expo. And we received, of course, the City Expo was not held this year at its normal time. It had intended to be rescheduled, which is right when COVID came. And so that event did not take place. Similarly, we were informed that event would not take place next year, that they wanted to revamp kind of what they did and what was going on with it. So that funding was removed. However, we took the $25,000 that CoLab typically received, and we've added out of one-time sources another $20,000. And so CoLab itself will receive $45,000 in total. The expo itself will receive none associated, because again, the event is not taking place. So, but that's what the asterisk is for, is that's out of a one-time source associated with that particular funding.
And last question, under the external agencies, I think I heard Amelia quote $377,000 in terms of reductions for the agencies that are listed. Was that a general percentage approach, or was it according? Can you kind of share
Sure.
with me how you arrived at those
and
reductions?
Yeah, it varied. If you'll remember from, I think, our last briefing, maybe the briefing before, there were a couple of programs that we actually are recommending in the budget, their complete elimination. So I'll use the I-73 Coalition as an example of that, which is we're coming into that and saying we believe we can continue to support those efforts at improving the existing road as well as upgrading to I-73 without the expense associated with the advocacy group that's tied with that. So there's a couple of those that are complete elimination. Then there are others that are reductions, and the reductions generally were applied on kind of a percentage basis, but not uniformly. But we tried to hit that as uniformly as we could, but in some cases that just wasn't easily done. And so for example, there is the deferral of the funding for the cultural endowment. What that allowed us to do is actually uniformly take less funding and cuts from the actual individual arts groups. So that's an example of where we were able to take one larger deferral or one larger reduction and therefore avoid having to apply that uniformly across all of the arts groups. So that was kind of how we took that approach in one class of those. On the human services side of things, we actually tried in those instances not to reduce anything. If you remember at the last briefing, we talked about pulling back some funding on the Human Services Advisory Board, as well as from individual organizations like TAP. That is no longer in the proposal. So we're holding level funding on the human services side of things, but we're actually reducing in the other areas that we mentioned, which either are those kind of one-offs like I-73, or in some of the arts groups as well. And in some cases, we're actually increasing the funding. For example, Blue Ridge Behavioral Health, that funding is actually going up from what it is that we're currently funding that organization for. So it really isn't, we tried to make it, rather than just a uniform approach, make it something that made some sense and that was actually related to your priorities. Again, putting that kind of human services priority above, if you will, the livability priority. So therefore, you saw more cuts in the livability collection of items versus those that are in the human services items. So hopefully that gives some sense of the approach that we took.
So in terms of the Arts Commission, what would you say that reduction is going to look like in terms of just in a comparison from what we were able to fund this year to what we'll be able to fund next year?
What it is they will simply receive less money that they will then award out to the individual agencies, and about $3,500 less from going to the commission that they will then award. And what it really means is either they will reduce what the individual awards are, or more likely, it probably means one or two of the requests or initiatives will fall below the line, if you will, as to what was requested for funding.
So this might be an opportunity to reevaluate some of the ways in which we request funding applications, maybe. And I know a lot of organizations do collaborative proposals anyway, but this might be an opportunity then for an increase in collaborative efforts in terms of how we approach funding, or?
I mean, they have already submitted their proposals for the year. Okay. So they always do that ahead of your budget.
Right.
We've got the commissions and the boards actually meet, make those recommendations. And then what they do is they really hold back as to what the award is until actually they know what the budget approval is associated with it. Certainly there will be other funding opportunities. I know several of them have applied for NEA funding that's associated with COVID, and there are some others that I do think would actually benefit from that collaborative type of approach. And remember, we also have we've identified in the budget, and if approved, includes the COVID recovery fund, which is open to ultimately trying to decide where it's most effective to facilitate the recovery of this community. And certainly there may be some opportunities tied with those as well as we progress forward.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Those are all my questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Bestpitch.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, thank you, Mr. Cowell, Ms. Merchant, and not only everyone on the management team and in the budget office that has been working on all this for so long, as Ms. White Boyd pointed out at the very beginning of our comments here this afternoon, but really all throughout the organization. You've had managers and supervisors who've had to take a very hard look at their situations and come up with reductions that they can live with and still provide the services that our citizens need and expect. So I really appreciate what everyone has done in that regard. A couple of my questions have actually already been answered, but a couple new ones have sort of kicked in based on some of the things that have been mentioned so far. But first of all, in the current fiscal year, do we have a number on the reduction in funding for the school system based on the funding formula and the revenues not coming in?
Yeah, we do, and I'm going to let Amelia. I don't know if we know that off the I don't know if we know that off the top of our head. There is a number, obviously, and we have provided that to the school. And we can certainly follow up with the council on the specific numbers. I think it's probably safer than sort of trying to guess at what that ended up being.
Sure, yeah, and I realize that wasn't really the focus of this briefing today. And but I just, I always want to take the opportunity to make sure everybody understands that the funding formula is still in place. We still honor it. We always say that if revenues exceed what we project or budget in advance, then they get their extra 40% out of whatever is additional is realized in any particular fiscal year, which is most years. But if it falls short, then they share in that as well. So.
And also recall that we are one of the few jurisdictions that also enables the school division to retain in a fund balance any kind of surplus that they may actually realize, either because of expenditure reduction.
Many jurisdictions throughout the Commonwealth, and I guess really around the country, require the school systems to return whatever unspent money may be there at the end of the year, which of course often means that school systems end up spending money very quickly at the end of the year, so they don't have to give it back, but maybe not always in the best way. But moving on, we talked about reduction in the funding for snow removal chemicals. We were fortunate this past season not to really need much in the way of snow removal chemicals. So do we have some surplus that's left over from this past year that?
We do, and also we really, and you all know this, who have been through a couple of storms around here, that we really fund very lightly anyway for that. And then ultimately, if we end up experiencing greater storm events or higher numbers, then we end up pulling that out of one of our contingencies in order to deal with it. And there's just always so much uncertainty, but we do have the ability to weather a couple of storms initially without having to really get too concerned. Obviously, if we have a long, deep winter, then we'll have issues that we'll have to deal with at that point.
Well, I'm one of those folks who is very concerned about climate change, but it really wouldn't hurt my feelings if we never got any more snow than what's out there on the ground right now today. But
you or Sherman Stovall.
So I will raise one concern, and I don't have any suggestion about this, Mr. Cowell, but when I look at the fact that we're saying we're not going to replace some of the fleet vehicles, that's one of the ways that we're going to balance the budget. To my mind, that means what we're going to try to do is keep the vehicles that we have in good repair and be able to continue operating them rather than replace them. And then I see where, in terms of personnel impact, we're losing a couple positions in the fleet management maintenance crew. So I hope we're looking at that carefully and deciding how we're going to really keep all these vehicles running past, in some cases at least, their expected lifetimes, because we're not in a position to replace them right now. We got to keep them running. So
our costs will definitely continue to increase as we further delay those or defer them. I will note, and I know it wasn't in the presentation, but it is in the transmittal letter you all received as well that accompanies the budget. We have identified really kind of a loose structure should revenues outperform or we receive funding that we're not accounting for right now, kind of the way in which we would look at refunding those, and certainly fleet purchases and trying to address that issue is in that priority list if we end up moving in that direction for just the reasons that you have stated.
Right. a couple things just to follow up on stuff earlier. You mentioned the funding for Blue Ridge Behavioral Health Care. Am I correct in thinking that that means we have completed our commitment to close that funding gap that we're still able to do for FY?
No, unfortunately, we're not. If you recall, last year we had embarked on what we believed would be a 2-year process to completely close the gap for a variety of really rather obtuse and complicated way. The funding request, even when we were looking at a good budget, the funding request actually went up dramatically, which was going to push us probably into a 3-year funding cycle. And then with the reduction of revenue, we've definitely gotten pushed into a multi-year cycle. So what this is it is about half of the amount that we would have been trying to fund to close that particular gap. It is still, I believe, and I think I can say this, I believe it is still more annual funding increases that we've ever allocated to them as we move forward. But we are still below what we ultimately want to have as a target for meeting that obligation. And of course, the other thing that's not real clear right now is the state has again changed some of the formulas that they're using to fund their operation at the larger level, and it may yet again dramatically change what's requested in FY22 as well. So we continue to work to try to close that gap, but not quite there yet.
Yeah, well, thank you. I hope we just keep that target out there in front of us, as I'm sure you do as well. And in terms of the Arts Commission funding, with the Percent for Arts program, with many of our capital projects, does that essentially lend itself to evening out over the years? You know, we've been trying to forecast or give some good estimates about what we think those percent will be, and then spread that out in more equal amounts year to year rather than huge swings up and down.
Yes, and we still do that. And so there is an amount that's allocated for the Percent for Arts in this budget year as well. And we still do kind of level those out across the year, so you don't have one year that has no funding and one year that has a significant amount of funding. So that will continue to be funded that way.
Well, let me just wrap up with a couple of things. First of all, I really appreciate the fact that you've listened to the concerns that we have expressed earlier about how we continue to support the most vulnerable in our society, in our community. And I think that's was clearly very important to, I believe, all of us. And I appreciate your taking notice of that. I also wanted to remind us all of what we heard from Beth Dowdy when she gave her last update on the regional partnership, because when we asked her about what we needed to do to continue to attract and retain the best businesses and the best employers, she said we just need to keep doing what we have been doing in terms of our infrastructure and our livability and that sort of thing. And all that really goes right back to the CIP. So I appreciate the fact that we're trying to maintain that as much as we can. And then the very last thing I have, Mr. Mayor, is, when we talk about money for this council, one of the things that comes to my mind is that we've been very fortunate over the years that we often end up on the first Mondays of every month working together right through our lunch times and having closed meetings or other discussions that keep us going. And so lunch comes in for us, and then sometimes in the evenings dinners come in if we're working straight through between the afternoon session and the 7 p.m. session. I think we can brown bag it. I really do. And I think we can set that money aside for contingencies that we may have as council members. We're talking about not taking as many trips, attending conferences and so forth, assuming that they even hold them. But if we have some needs, to me, I think that's a way that we can put some money aside and maybe end up with a surplus in our budget for council operations by the end of the year. I'll just throw that out there for everyone's consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bestfitch. You're going back. I remember one of my council colleagues, I think it was, I won't call her name, I think she knows. She stripped us of everything we were getting, but I understand that, the need of that, and I think that's something that we can take a look at this year if it gets around, or at least having something not as elaborate, but something to just give us some energy to go on some of those long days that we have. All right, I'm on Councilwoman. Can you hear me? Okay, Councilwoman Trish White Board has another question, and then I'm gonna come back to you, Councilwoman Davis, to finish it up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question actually is for Mr. Cowell. I know in the beginning when we were talking about a part of our recovery was to do some testing or ramp up the testing. And I was hoping that Ms. Odell would have gotten on the conference call last Wednesday, and she wasn't able to make it. But I'm wondering if we do that, if we don't get money from the state or the federal, are we going to be able to use some of those funds in the contingency to ramp up our testing? Because I know that was a part of our, I don't know what phase, but as far as completely opening up the city was to ramp up that testing. And I didn't see it anywhere in there. And I just thought about that. I didn't ask that.
Yeah, of course, you all know that most of the testing is done either upon entry of a hospital, so done by the hospital itself, or by a doctor with a clinical diagnosis in their office, or by the health department. And so the health department has predominantly focused on testing healthcare workers and first responders and those working in nursing homes. So that's where their focus has been. The governor had a target of 10,000 tests per day being performed across the Commonwealth. And last week they were at about 9,800 tests, somewhere around there. That's not necessarily evenly distributed, obviously, across the entire state. And so certainly if there is an interest in ultimately in any community, probably ramping up testing capabilities, if they exist, if you can actually ramp those capabilities up. One of the funding sources that exists is the money that is coming through the CARES Act down to the localities and to the states. That is one of the eligible expenses that would be possible with that, as would trying to promote contact tracing or any of those types of things. What's not clear, we actually just had a conversation about this morning among all the jurisdictions, and what's not clear is what role really should we play versus the Department of Health, and ultimately we know what the state's plans are for the additional testing, not really sure that those are going to make their way to here in terms of additional testing, because their focus has been more on trying to build up their contact tracing focus. So that's a long round way of saying that I do think that the funds are available as we advance further into this year, coming from the state funding that's coming out of the CARES Act. But I think we need to have a lot more guidance from the state as to what they're expecting, what they're going to be doing, and then what they might expect localities to be doing. So that, it's still, I think, pretty uncertain. I think they're getting very close to the number of tests they want to do. But, I don't know if there are plans beyond what they're actually had set as that first benchmark.
Thank you, Mr. Cowell. I know we had conversation about it initially, and we haven't had any further conversation. So I was wondering if that was going to happen and where the money would come from, but you explained it as you could.
Thank
you. Ms. Davis.
Thank you. I have a couple of, I guess, that these become really specific questions, and I apologize for getting into the minutia, and yet I think it's also important that we at least make sure that we're talking about these things. The first thing I wanted to mention, one of the reductions that was mentioned was city council training. And while I certainly agree that there are ways that we can all pitch in, I think some of the ways that we've already done, for example, bringing our own water and doing those kinds of things are really important. However, there has been a real lack of city council training for a long time now. I was excited that there were some plans in place for this year to do more of a council orientation than has been done in the past several years. And I think it is critically important for this council, and especially knowing that there will be a lot of new members on council, that orientation be in place that it be done at at a low cost, certainly agree with that. But I just want to make sure that that is not getting cut out of the budget.
Yeah, no.
I think our most recent folks will even tell you there was more orientation is necessary for us to be able to hit the ground running
I think
as effective council members.
Yeah, as you and I have talked, I think, before with orientation, no, we will actually be enhancing the orientation for the incoming council members. Because again, most of that can be done here, all of it can be done here locally with the resources that we have. You know, the one exception to that is obviously there are usually newly elected training programs are made available in Richmond. And obviously, if those are still available, there's still funding to do that. If they're not available, they'll be done virtually and we'll be able to do that. What this really reflects is the reality. I think Mr. Bestfitch mentioned it. It's really the reality that some of the conferences and events, be they the National Civic League, as the mayor alluded to in Denver, or the National League of Cities conference, it's very unlikely those will occur. And so that allowed us to reduce that funding, but no, orientation will not be affected at all. We'll continue to expand what we were talking about with those.
Great, thank you for that. And then the other question I had was on the reduction in performance agreements. I feel like that's a pretty broad category. And I'd be interested in knowing specifically what performance agreements are going to be reduced and how that would be possible, since it is an agreement that was already put in place.
Yeah, it's actually pretty straightforward. Some of those agreements actually account for some value of consumption taxes. So they may be values associated with sales tax collected or those others. And as they go down, so does the agreement or the funding that we would offer associated with those. So there's no reduction in what they receive. It's just an acknowledgement that what we anticipate that they'll actually take in and they will receive back. Because remember, most of our performance agreements are returning tax dollars that are paid into the program. And so we're just assuming at that point that those dollars will not be received at the same level they have been in the past.
Okay, perfect.
And then obviously if they are, then they'll be continue to be funded with those.
Okay, so there's no anticipation of any attempt to renegotiate any existing performance agreement?
No.
And then I guess my last question is just based on conversation that you and I had in the past week, which was about Virginia's Blue Ridge. And I noticed that they are still on the slide from an external agency standpoint as being funded, which is great. And but I think the concern, just like with any of our partners that are funded based on a percentage formula, that the overall piece of the pie is going to be much lower, and therefore what they actually get is going to be much lower. And so has there been any further communication with Virginia's Blue Ridge about what we might be able to do to help with a reopening kind of marketing campaign for the area when we're all ready for that?
Yeah, there's been some additional conversations that we've had, and somewhat similar to the schools, although a little bit different in that it's not formula funded really as much as it's tax based. So as soon as the tax revenue comes in at whatever level, they receive 3/8 of that revenue. So what we've shown is just our projection of what we estimate that to be. We've had conversations with them. I've had conversations with them about different ways that formula, not formula, but the way that that's allocated over the course of the year could be allocated so as to not necessarily force everything. If the performance actually ends up being better than it is projected, that they don't have to try to figure out how to wait till the very end of the year to make to receive those funds. The county's having the same conversation with them. And actually at our request on Friday of this week, VBR still has not presented a budget to the executive, to the funding partners. And so we've requested that on Friday that they do that based off of what the projections are that each of the jurisdictions have provided.
Okay.
And the purpose of that is to identify what kind of organization that then yields and what goes lacking or what's missing. And then we can have the second part of that conversation, which is to say, okay, are we satisfied with what that organization looks like and what it can deliver? Or is there a need to find some additional resources wherever those may come from, or different ways in which, again, to allocate the dollars that we anticipate that they'll receive through the course of the year. So yeah, there have been some more. I don't think we're anywhere near kind of finalizing any of those discussions yet as they go on. One of the things that they got impacted with is none of the CARES Act funding actually can go
Right.
to them because of their status as a 501c6, which makes them ineligible. And so that's been a part of the struggle associated with it as well. But I think all of the contributing jurisdictions felt like the first step was to actually have that budget prepared so that we know what it is that we're not able to purchase based off of those, and then we can kind of go from there.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Cowell and Mayor Lee. That concludes my questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bob, I just have a comment. First, I want to thank you and your staff and Amelia and everybody who's worked so hard to put this together in tough times. And so that's really appreciated, and the many phone calls you've gotten, I've talked about, you and I've talked about. Thank you so much. Let me say in regards to, and I mentioned this earlier to the group that was here, that the National Civic League has decided today to have a virtual conference. We won't have to go to Denver, and we are, as most listeners know, we're the finalists. We're one of the cities that are finalists again, which congratulations again to you and the work and what we put together there. And so that information on that will be coming out. I just happened to be a part of the board of directors meeting this afternoon, and so we won't be going to Denver this year for that award ceremony.
Yeah, ironically, of course, the topic this year is actually on health, which I thought was a timely topic.
Okay. And they would like to know what we've done, and we talk about how we collaborate here and communicate, and that's something that Doug there wants to know, because he feels that that's an asset when we come into times like this, and communities and cities and towns get together and talk about what they're doing, and that's so impressive. And I share with them that we'll be maybe sending them some information regarding what we're doing before, the things that we did before COVID-19. I mean, we were talking and meeting before COVID-19, and I think that's important. And they want to see what cities are doing, and they felt that that we're one of those cities that they've heard that does a good job in that category. Just a lot of questions have been asked, but I just want to ask you, when we look on just added here a few minutes ago regarding administrative support for athletics in the city, can we make sure under livability, elimination of administrative support to recreation clubs? I understand that, and we've talked about that we get the word out, because sometimes that could be interpreted that everybody's on their own to a degree. We're not doing certain things. There are things we did that we're not going to do now, but that's not saying we're eliminating youth sports and activities. I think that's important for the citizen to know.
Right. As the budget approval progresses, we'll certainly be communicating to folks what that entails. Obviously, as we've talked about, what it basically means we will be doing is we will continue to provide the facilities for the rec clubs to actually conduct the activities, but we will no longer be providing the timekeepers, the referees, those types of activities. That those will fall upon those groups in moving forward with them. Likewise, assuming we can still conduct these kinds of programs based on COVID associated reasons, we will still continue offering youth recreation and youth kinds of activities as well, separate from not competing with, but different than, and separate from the rec club. So we'll have more of those sort of conversations and make that clearer as the budget approval process progresses, so everybody knows what that entails.
Good. I think that's important. Okay, thank you, Bob.
And Amelia has one additional slide just to share with you all relative for the public to know kind of what's the next steps. We're actually delivering the budget obviously today, but there are still a couple of more steps to make it official. And then additionally, after that slide, well, not after the slide, but I just want to again remind each of you that obviously once you have a chance to actually look at the actual budget document, I'll set up a time to talk with each of you individually with any other questions that you might have based off of those details and stuff as we go along as well. So I'll let Amelia give you the last slide, which contains the calendar for the rest of the process. So thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Mayor Lee, and just before I go into that slide, I'd be remiss if I did not thank those who have worked tirelessly with all of us to develop this budget, in addition to, of course, the city manager and both assistant city managers, as well as Brent Robertson, who is on our team, the directors in the departments. I would like to thank individually those Department of Finance, Management, and Budget Division staff who have worked tirelessly. R.B. Longhorn, Katie Davis, who knows the inside and outside of a pivot table in Excel to keep us straight. Paul Workman, Leisha Van Buren, Stefano Claude, and Justin Hazelwood, who have worked tirelessly to help us create what has been presented before you today. I just want to thank them for the work that they have done. Slide 28 presents to us the remaining calendar for the activities related to budget adoption. On Thursday, May 28th at 7 p.m., we have scheduled the public hearings, which have been advertised. The real estate tax rate advertisement actually has been done. The general fund advertisement will go forward as well this week for May 28th at 7 p.m., as well as the HUD CDBG advertisement for the public hearing, all taking place on Thursday, May 28th. June 1st at 9 a.m., budget study with City Council, and then on June 15, again at 2 p.m., scheduled for budget adoption. And we look forward to working through the last items, which will make it available, make it possible for us to adopt the fiscal 21 budget. As Bob indicated, following the briefing today, the recommended budget document itself will be available on the city's webpage, as well as the presentation and a budget overview document, which will be pretty handy for anyone who wants to gather information regarding the recommended budget in a summary form, as well as the recommended document itself.
Thank you. Thank you. And if there are no questions, we'll make sure that we receive and file this budget briefing. And any questions? If not, I'll call on the city manager really to introduce the next briefing.
Thank you. I believe David's on the phone, right? So David's going to walk us through this. So this is associated with some debt financing opportunities that we have that are tied with our industrial facilities authority. If you will recall, we participate jointly with, in this case, two other jurisdictions, Roanoke County and the city of Salem, in the development of a new technology park in Roanoke County. And of course, we have issued debt in order to be able to manage that construction, which is under construction right now. And so David Rose with Davenport has some additional information that has been shared with the Industrial Facilities Authority and some action that they have taken as well that affects us positively also. So if David there?
Yes,
David,
sir. I'm here, Bob.
It's all yours, David, to lead through the presentation, then we'll come back for questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I was actually watching you on the laptop, and so again, I could see your deliberations with the budget, and I appreciate your letting me speak today. Let me start by saying that this is informational only. We will be in front of you, if you'll allow us, formally at the June 1st meeting to hopefully take the actions that we're going to recommend this afternoon. Second, I don't plan to be very long because hopefully I think you'll all agree we've got some very good news to share during this very difficult time. With that, if you would, I believe, Tiffany, you've got the ability to turn the pages there for everyone. I just go to page 1. You may recall that in addition to having the good fortune of serving you as a financial advisor, we also serve Western Virginia RIFA and have done that since its inception. So back in 2016, we did an initial financing. The financing was for $10 million, and we did that directly through a competitive process. And Union Bank, now Atlantic Union Bank, was the winning bidder, if you would. And we set up the structure to be 17, basically out to 20 years. We're now several years into it, so we have effectively about 17 years to go. And we approached John and Beth several months ago about the opportunity to perhaps take advantage of interest rates that have come down as a refunding purely to save money. So if you turn to page 2, give you the context of why we said all this. At the time, we have locked in and still do a 3.7% fixed rate for what is, again, about 17 years left out to 2037. One of the big advantages that Union Bank gave us at the time was that we could prepay this without any penalty for whatever reason. And here we are for the reason now that rates have come down even further. And even since the COVID crisis reared its ugly head earlier this winter, interest rates are basically hovering at roughly 50-year lows. You may recall that, I think as Bob indicated, there are three participants in this particular loan. You and the county are each the same at a little over 44%, and the city of Salem at about 11.5%. So with all of that being said, we wanted to talk about trying to do this on page 3. We ended up getting competitive proposals from the 3 banks that you see there. Atlantic Union once again stepped up as the most competitive. Now, everything we think is moving in the right direction, with the caveat that Atlantic Bank still needs to give us a formal credit approval. I will tell you, we don't see any reason why that would not occur, but again, these are somewhat unreasonable times. So we want to be sure we don't count our chickens before they hatch. However, having said that, we do believe that when we talked to the authority board back in late April, we gave them an essence of what we thought the rates would be in the savings. We are delighted to say that by virtue of this new rate, the savings is even materially higher than what we had estimated when we first identified the opportunity. So on page 4, what we are then looking at is a fixed interest rate at that 2.59% for the remaining period of time. It once again allows us to prepay this in whole or part without penalty, so we continue to have this flexibility. And the savings right now, if indeed everything moves closer to the closing, which has to occur by June 19th, the Friday, is $950,000 of interest avoided. And that is basically 3 times what our estimate was when we first started thinking about this. The way to think about all of this is that we were able to see the present value at a little over 8%. That's a fancy way of saying we can move cash flows around, but you can't change the present value. It's sort of the equivalent of what you really pay in a car loan, that APR, if you would. There's no way to play games with that. And anything above a 3% present value, this is after taking into consideration all of the bank costs, all of the interest, all of the costs of doing a transaction, is going to be over 8%. That's nearly 3 times the level that's considered a worthwhile transaction. And that number there is $950,000 roughly. And in a couple of pages, I'll show you what that breaks down to per local government and the authority by year. So we'll get that. So on page 5, couple of important things. Because it's the same bank, really all of the documentation is staying the same. Their due diligence review in no way should hurt us. The city has done an excellent job since then. It's only stronger. You understand well how you've been able to go and adjust to 2020's year-end numbers. We think that the county has been likewise, and we work with Salem as well. So we think all three of you as local governments look very solid. So with that said, on page 6 is what I promised, which is what is the savings based on all of this? And I said it's a little over $950. The actual estimated savings is almost $958,840. And your 44% roughly is about $425,000, like Roanoke's. And then the 11% is roughly $111,000 for Salem. What you'll notice is that if this again closes by the 19th, the savings for the city will be roughly $95,000 in the 21 fiscal year. It then is $45,000 the second year, and then it levelizes at about $18,500 thereabouts over the remaining years out to 2037. So again, nothing of pushing out any principal, no additional risk being taken, and the rates are locked in throughout 2037 at that, again, 2.59%. So lastly, on page 7, you can see here between page 7 and 8, the last thing is a timetable. We had a presentation that was made by my colleague Kyle Laux to the board of RIFA on Friday. I'm here with you telephonically to, again, relay what we're asking, and that is that you allow all of the parties to move forward. It was unanimously recommended to move forward by the RIFA board, and you can see where Salem meets next Tuesday night, Roanoke County meets next Tuesday night. In both of those instances, like today, no action being required, just to educate all the parties. And then the last page here, when the councils do indeed meet, is June 1st for you, the 8th for Salem, the 9th for Roanoke County, and then again, we have about a week, 10 days to get to closing, which is required by the 19th. I think what's important is that 2.59% is locked in. And so again, all the terms, conditions, hopefully all we're going to hear is Atlantic Union is going to give us a formal credit approval, and that should come fairly soon. So with that, happy to answer any questions. I appreciate this. Amelia, Bob, Paul, a lot of folks did a whole lot of work on this, including the city attorney. So we appreciate that. I'll be quiet. Thank you.
All right. Good report, Bob. David, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Members of council have any questions?
I just have a quick question. This is the first time I've seen this report. Are we going to actually get a hard copy? Because some of the numbers on the last page were pretty small. I couldn't see them. But I was wondering what the difference is between a general obligation and a moral obligation for Roanoke County and Roanoke City. Both Salem said general and Roanoke City said general, but then Roanoke County says moral. Is there some sort of commitment?
Yeah, now,
that's a good.
David, I'll just talk about the hard copy and I'll let you do the actual financial question. So yes, we'll forward you, the council, a hard copy of the information that has been provided.
So that's a great question that the councilwoman asked. So here's the way it works in Virginia, right or wrong. The cities, by and large, are allowed to provide a general obligation pledge, which is the strongest pledge that you can provide. It's your full faith and credit. However, almost all the counties, with just a few short exceptions, are are only allowed to provide a moral obligation, but that is short of having to do a referendum. So if they had gone to referendum, they could provide a general obligation. But as many of you will think about it, it's not really practical to have the cost, the timing, the uncertainty, and all of that. And this is, relatively speaking, was coming up very quickly. Even back in 2016, the thinking is if the moral obligation would suffice, that would be acceptable to the banks, and it was. Ideally, you'd love to have a general obligation. It's a better credit. But in fairness, for banks and lending institutions, they realize that Virginia counties, by and large, their moral obligation is tantamount to being a general obligation, because frankly, if Roanoke County were to say, you know what, we're only morally required to do this, we're not going to make the payment, they would effectively be locked out of borrowing any future money for anything. And on top of that, the other small detail is, by virtue of being a moral ob, they had to provide the government center, their government center, as collateral. So that's really a hit, needless to say. Whereas for you in Salem, all you provide is your full faith and credit that you'll put it in your budgets. And the reason for that is because, frankly, if you do not make your general obligation payment, whether it's for this or the financing that we did with you just a couple of months ago, then what happens is the state has an intercept formula and has the ability to cut off monies that you otherwise would get for any things that you do, and they would take those first monies and make payments to bondholders. And that's something that all general obligations have had for decades now in Virginia for local governments.
Thank you for explaining that to me. I was trying to understand the difference, and I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions?
And Mayor, if I may, I just want to again thank David and Kyle and Joe for the help they've offered in this, all from Davenport, but also, as was alluded to, our previous financing and refunding of debt as well. As you all know, all of those have resulted in pretty phenomenal interest rates, as well as some pretty significant savings across the life of those loans, as well as a time when we really need the savings. And really, all of that is only possible because of both the advice that they gave, the action that you all authorized, and just the timeliness of when all of this occurred. Because you'll remember, we actually hosted the 3 credit rating agencies virtually right at the beginning of really all of this taking place. So the timing was about as perfect as you could get it, so that we could take advantage of these opportunities. So I certainly appreciate the help that David and his folks have offered. And again, the action that you all have authorized in the past as we've moved through these. So I'll be happy to answer any last questions if anyone has any.
All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And David.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, be safe.
All right, we're going to receive and file this briefing. And we'll go back now to items that have been recommended for action. Item number 1 is the acceptance of the Summer Food Program grant from the Virginia Department of Education. There's a resolution.
This is Vice Mayor Cobb. I move the resolution.
Michelle Davis, second the resolution.
All right, Madam Clerk, read the title paragraph, please.
A resolution authorizing the acceptance of a summer food program grant from the Virginia Department of Education, and authorizing execution and attestation of any required documents on behalf of the city in connection with such grant under certain conditions.
Thank you. Any comments from members of council? Questions? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Osborne,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
and Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the resolution passes. There's a budget ordinance.
Vice Mayor Cobb, I move the budget ordinance.
Michelle
White
Davis,
Boyd.
second the budget ordinance.
Madam Clerk, would you read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the federal government through the Virginia Department of Education for the summer food program, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2019-2020 grant fund appropriations and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
All right, any questions or comments from members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Osborne,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
and Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the vote is 5-0, and the budget ordinance passes. Thank you. Acceptance, the next item is the acceptance of the 2020 Urban Heat Island Mapping Grant from the National Oceanic Atmosphere Administration's Climate Program Office to conduct a scientific field mapping campaign. There's a resolution.
Bill Bestfitch, I move the resolution.
Juna Osborne, second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you read the title paragraph?
A resolution accepting the 2020 Urban Heat Island Mapping Services to the city from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, Climate Program Office, and authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding with CAPA Strategies, LLC, and any required documentation with a local nonprofit agency that will provide volunteers for the project on behalf of the city.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from members of council?
Mayor Lee, this is Vice Mayor Cobb. Maybe a question that Bob can answer. I noticed that under the considerations on this, we are asked to secure volunteers to assist in compiling the data. Will that be in partnership with our Office of Sustainability and other community organizations? Like, can you just describe whom those volunteers might be drawn from?
I can start and then see if Sherman wants to add anything.
Clean Valley Council.
The Clean Valley Council. Okay, so the Clean Valley Council will actually be leading that part of it.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Osborne,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the vote is 6-0, and the resolution passes. Thank you. Our next item is an amendment to the Virginia Department of Housing and Urban Development's Citizen Participation Plan due to COVID-19. There's one measure, which is a resolution.
Ms. White Boyd, move the resolution.
Juna Osborne, second.
All right, I'll ask clerk to read the title paragraph.
A resolution amending all citizen comment periods set forth in the Citizen Participation Plan adopted February 3rd, 2014, regarding the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development Community Development Block Grant Program due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency, allowing for notification of all such citizen comment periods through posting on the city website and authorizing the city manager to submit this amendment to HUD.
Thank you, Ms. McCoy. Any questions Comments by members of council?
Mayor Lee.
Yes, sir.
Well, I know we received a couple of emails that from citizens who were concerned about the reduction of the comment period. I guess it would be helpful for me to hear the rationale behind this. I understand the pandemic and what we're facing in this regard. But it's interesting to me that we have to give a 30-day notice to announce a reduced period of time for citizens to be able to comment in, and that just seems odd to me. I know.
Yeah, these funds specifically relate to the special CDBG funds that were allocated in response to COVID. And so what HUD has done is authorized this expedited, or this process that allows an expedited review in order to actually get the funds out into the community faster, is what the objective is. It only applies actually to this particular instance. So as we go forward with, for example, your next allocation, you'll be under the 30-day comment period again, just as you have always been. So it only affects this particular, and it really was for that reason that HUD authorized it, was so that they could move those dollars out in the community as fast as practical.
So is an added week going to make that much difference in the scheme of things for when this funding is approved and then sent out?
I mean, it actually moves it 30 days, 25 days, right? Yeah, because it's going from 5 days. So normally we would have a 30-day comment period, which I will say that the 2 comments that you received, I've only been here 3 years. Brian's been here doing it longer. That's more comments than we've ever received inside any of those 30-day periods. So
that's good.
It really goes from 5 days to 30 days. So you would pick up 25 days. And yes, I mean, it does slow our ability to actually deliver those funds as we move forward with it and stuff. So, you know, again, that's the objective for it. As far as I know, most of the communities that I have seen, most of the entitlement communities, certainly that I have observed, are all taking advantage of this to move it much faster through the process.
Okay, thank you, Bob. That makes sense.
Well, thank you.
Mayor Lee, members of council, Dan Callahan. Just that added point, one of the public hearings you'll be having next week is on the 2020 HUD plan that does have a 30-day notice. And the amendments with regard to the 2019 plan, because you had not adopted this measure yet, you're considering it today, you're actually having a public hearing on June 1st. With regard to the 2019, the comment period ends June 12th. It started last Thursday, and you'll act on it on June 15th. So everyone is getting a 30-day comment period on that. So this is proactive to the extent there are other funds that HUD may make available to us. And to respond to one of the questions specifically, this period will automatically expire when HUD says it's no longer taking waivers as a result of the pandemic disaster.
All right, thank you, Ms. Callahan. Any other comments by members of council? All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bestich?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Ms. Osborne?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
And Mayor Lee?
Aye. And the vote is 6-0. The resolution passes. All right, item number 4 is the acquisition of real property rights in connection with the Huntington Boulevard Drainage and Improvements Project. There is an ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd moved the ordinance.
Gina Osborne, second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you read the title paragraph?
An ordinance providing for the acquisition of real property rights needed by the city in connection with the Huntington Boulevard Site 5 Drainage and Pedestrian Improvements Project, authorizing city staff to acquire such property rights needed by the city for the project by negotiation, authorizing the city manager to execute appropriate acquisition documents, and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
Thank you. Any questions by members of council? Or comments? All right, hearing none, I'll ask clerk to please call the roll.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Osborne,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
and Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the ordinance passes from a 6-0 vote. Thank you. At this time, I'm pleased to recognize our city manager, Mr. Bob Cowell, for his comments.
Sorry, I was not paying close enough attention. So just a couple of items in addition to what we've already discussed. Most of these folks are familiar with, but just want to reinforce them again. Of course, starting last week, we moved into the beginning of the governor's reopening under the Forward Virginia guidelines. And there are a number of resources available on our website, both to explain further how the city anticipates its own reopening and moving alongside whatever the state is doing as it goes forward, but also resources for the community, resources for business, as well as resources for faith-based organizations. And again, all of that is available on our website in a variety of different subpages when you go there as well. There are also copies of each of the executive orders, as well as information associated with the Virginia Department of Health and CDC also. So folks that are looking for any of that information can continue to go to that website. As has been noted earlier, the Valley Metro has extended the free fare-free services, and that'll be talked about again as well. I also wanted to highlight the National Public Works Week this week from May 17th through 23rd. Which is when the city of Roanoke is celebrating its public works operations and staff. This is certainly a time when they're called upon to do things in different sort of circumstances than they typically are. I certainly want to thank them for the work that they are doing with that as well. And these are usually positions that most folks don't actually necessarily see out in the community, but trust they definitely the work they do we all rely upon greatly. So I want to thank them for the work that they're doing. So those are the items that I had that I wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cowell. Does anybody have any questions for the city manager? All right, item number 8 is reports of committees. A report of the Roanoke City School Board requesting appropriation of funds for various educational programs, and a report of the city manager recommending that council concur in the request. Donna Caldwell, Director of Accounting, is a spokesperson. There is a budget ordinance. Can I get a motion?
Gina Osborne, move the budget ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd, second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from federal and Commonwealth grants for various educational programs, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2019-2020 school grant fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
All right, any questions or comments by members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Osborne,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the vote is 6-0 to pass this budget ordinance. Thank you. Item number 10 is introduction and consideration of ordinances and resolutions. An ordinance to ratify and approve the extension of the suspension of fares for transit services provided by Greater Roanoke Transit Company, which is GRTC, Valley Metro. There is an ordinance.
Vice Mayor Cobb, I move the ordinance.
Go Bestfitch, second.
Madam Clerk, please read the title paragraph.
An ordinance ratifying and approving the suspension of fares for transit services provided by Greater Roanoke Transit Company, doing business as Valley Metro, authorizing further extension of suspension to a date not later than June 30, 2020, authorizing the reinstatement of fares upon the expiration of the suspension, authorizing the city manager to take certain actions, and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by members of council?
Mayor, this is Vice Mayor Cobb. Just had two quick questions. I think we're grateful for this opportunity to have free fares, especially during this pandemic. I wondered if anybody could talk with us briefly about two things, how the pandemic has affected ridership and how that's been impacted by free fares, and if we have any comparative data on that yet. I'm not sure there.
Vice Mayor Cobb and members of council, we know that ridership has declined significantly. I think we had included some information in a prior weekly update. We will get that information back out to you. The suspension of the collection of fares is one of the social distancing measures that was implemented primarily to protect the transit operators. As the city manager mentioned earlier, the fact that Valley Metro is receiving a significant amount of CARES Act funding, we think the CARES Act funding will completely offset the loss in revenue.
Thank you, Sherman. I appreciate that. And I just want to extend my thanks to the staff and the drivers at Valley Metro for their extraordinary service during this time.
Well, thank you. Well said, Vice Mayor. I mean, when we talk about frontliners, those who are out front, those bus drivers and staff, especially bus drivers, are right there. And I agree with you 100% that that's, I appreciate the work that's gone into that to make that transit available so that people can get back and forth. All right, any other comments by members of council or questions? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bestfitch.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Ms. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. White-Boyd.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the vote is 5-0 and the ordinance passes.
My dog Jojo also voted in support of that. I apologize.
Thank you, Ms. I don't feel so bad with my phone acting up on press conferences last week. You remember that, Joe? I know you were there. And all of a sudden, they started talking out of nowhere, and I'm trying to carry it up. But thank you all. We're now down to item number 11, which is motion and miscellaneous businesses. Let me just go in order to see if anybody has anything. I'll start with Mr. Bestfitch and come down the line. Bill, is there anything you have to add to motion and miscellaneous business?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Cal for the work that's gone into this document that they pulled together on what we're doing, how we recover from the current situation, and the resiliency that our community has and will continue to have going forward. I think that's a great collection of information and processes and procedures for the community to be aware of, and I hope people will take advantage of that and take a look at it. And sort of in that regard, I guess one of the things that's been on my mind is what do we do as a community? Mr. Cal has mentioned several times about how the leadership of all the jurisdictions in our area have been putting their heads together and talking about things throughout this whole pandemic. And I wonder what discussion has happened or will happen regarding the need for our area and obviously the Commonwealth of Virginia and the whole country to be better prepared in terms of stockpile of emergency equipment, whether it's PPE or whatever it may be. And that's, you know, we're still just trying to get up to the level where everybody that needs to be tested can be tested and everybody that needs to be tracked can be tracked. I understand that, but I think we need to start thinking long-term how we advocate for a better situation the next time something like this comes along, because there will be a next time. I think, you know, I remember growing up and getting the little sugar cubes with the polio vaccine that Dr. Saban had come up with. And at that time, a lot of people were thinking, well, you know, infectious diseases have been solved. Nobody gets smallpox anymore. You know, we can have everybody vaccinated against tetanus. All these things are not going to be a problem in the future. And that has turned out to be very foolish thinking. We need to really put our heads together locally so that we can work regionally and statewide and nationwide to figure out how we are much better prepared the next time we face some sort of a situation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Gaspich. Vice Mayor Cobbs, any motions or miscellaneous business that you have?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank our city's homeless services department and our homeless service agencies who are doing a really extraordinary job of not only looking out for some of the most vulnerable in our community, but making sure that they have access to the services they need. Alongside that, I have some concern that the courts reopened today. And according to information that I heard last week on a call with community partners, there are approximately 80 eviction cases that are slated to begin being heard today. I have real concerns about that. I don't know how that aligns with what the governor has set forward, but I share the two alongside each other, because while we are, I think, doing a very effective job of meeting the needs, we are likely to see a significant increase in not only individuals, but families finding themselves homeless because of loss of income, because of emergencies in addition to this pandemic. I don't know how well prepared we are for that influx, but I wonder if Bob or someone could just talk with us briefly about any conversations that are taking place to prepare ourselves for what I think is going to be a pretty daunting reality.
Some of the funding that we were talking about earlier that deals with what's referred to as the ESG funding, and even some of the CDBG COVID funding is specifically, and we typically fund these anyway, we're just now going to receive additional funding in those categories, are available or will be available as those programs are expanded to address things like rent and possibly some of them even may address mortgage payments as well, to try to minimize the chances that someone becomes homeless. Of course, the Water Authority has taken steps previously to avoid cutoffs for utilities, as well as they have partnered with United Way prior to COVID to try and ensure that funds were made available so that folks had an opportunity to keep their utilities active as they go forward. So there are some programs that are already out there, and there will continue to be even more funding put toward those programs. And the objective of those is to try to keep someone from becoming homeless. Once they, if they are indeed homeless, then of course in this community that is predominantly provided in response through, as you mentioned, the homeless assistance team, but also really through the rescue mission and our shelters at that point as well. And certainly the shelter currently is operating at a lower capacity than it normally would, just because of its need to be able to maintain a safe population. And so it's moving a bit more deliberately and being obviously practicing physical distancing to the extent that it can. So certainly those will continue to be impacts as we move forward with that as well. I mean, you know, the converse part of it as well is, of course, you hear this in many states that are starting to lift the restrictions against evictions are that the folks that own those properties, whether they be commercial properties or residential properties, they themselves, of course, are struggling with making their payments associated with the debts that they own also, because they do rely on those incomes in order to make their payments. So that's why these programs that actually have been designed to try to get funds to folks so that they can indeed continue to pay their rents have been the most effective as they go forward.
Thank you, Bob. I think you bring up a good point on how interconnected we all are in this and how that's showing up. I just wanted to also say thank you to everyone who is wearing face coverings and face masks, not only those who are making them, but those agencies that are receiving these donations. Those go hand in hand. I also want to give a shout out to our business, retail, and restaurant community for everything they've been doing to honor the guidelines for this phase 1 of reopening. Really commend you all and thank all of our citizens who are honoring these guidelines as you go out to these places to support them. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
I don't think I have anything to add at this point in time. Appreciate Vice Mayor Cobb's comments, and just appreciate all of the community coming together. We've seen some tremendous efforts and outputs in the past 8 weeks, and I'm grateful that we have such a caring community that really is supporting the most vulnerable amongst us. I think we saw that in our budget proposal that our city staff came up with today. And that's being echoed, and that style of leadership I think is critically important right now, and it's being echoed throughout this community. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. I had a couple of comments. I wanted to first thank Tiffany for her effort to coordinate each of us on council to give us an opportunity in our videos to be able to address our community. And if any of you haven't had a chance to see them, then you can go see us on YouTube, each of us on council addressing a particular aspect of the city and letting you know where we are with all things and just keeping you up to date. I've enjoyed watching my colleagues deliver their videos. It was good to see. I also wanted to remind people to, as Vice Mayor Cobb indicated, to stay vigilant. When I was reading our monthly update and I saw that the ages impacted in the Roanoke area by coronavirus range from 8 months to 99 years, I just want to emphasize that no one is immune from coronavirus and its impact. So I encourage you, again, as Vice Mayor Cobb already suggested, to continue to be vigilant with hand washing, sanitizing, using hand sanitizer when you can find it available, continuing to wear your masks, respecting social distancing guidelines. I think it's really important. Phase 1 is just that. It's a phase of initial reopening, and it will take us, every single one of us, continuing to do our part personally and in collaboration with others to continue to keep us safe. And I had one other thing. And I've completely forgotten what it was. So I will just end on that note to continue to stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Trish Whiteboard.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I was going to ask, I did mention it earlier when I made a comment, but is Molly Odell coming back this week for your briefing? One that she canceled last week, her appearance. Is she going to be back this week?
No, she will not be. We actually, I had mentioned earlier that all of the local administrators, both in the Roanoke Valley as well as the Allegheny Highlands, twice a week get together on a phone conference to discuss the response to COVID. And Molly has over the last several weeks joined us on both those days, Mondays and Thursdays. And actually today she shifted to where she's only doing Thursday meetings. Her caseload in terms of their workload is increasing dramatically, associated with really getting all of the contact tracing work all scheduled and squared away. So she's trying to focus on predominantly two things, which is one of those is on Tuesdays, she briefs the media, and she will continue to do that. And then on Thursdays, she will continue to brief the area administrators. We will still try at some point to get her back on the press conference, but I know this week we're not able to do that. So we'll keep working on getting her in so that, and it may be actually more effective once she's been able to progress on the hiring of the contact tracers. If you recall, in one of the updates, I indicated that they're trying to hire 201 folks for this Southwest Virginia area, and they'll all be actually trained here in the Roanoke area as they go forward. So I know she's deeply involved in that, and it may be more helpful to know once those are squared away what their jobs will be and how many and those kinds of things. So we'll keep working on having her join us.
Well, the reason I asked Mr. Cowell is because, you know, I think I mentioned this to you last week when we had our conversation that we were supposed to be on a 2-week downward trend before we opened. And of course, the governor decided to move forward with that. And I know that we're going to hire these contact tracers, but I am a little bit concerned about the limited testing. And I know you said that we don't know if we're going to be able to ramp it up or not, but I thought that was some of the information that we were given preliminarily, that we would be getting more testing, because to me, it's the contact tracing is not going to be that effective if we're not able to do the testing. And I know how it works. I know that, you know, it's basically first responders, or if you have, you know, if you're symptomatic and the doctor requested. But, you know, if they do the contact tracing, are we going to be able to accommodate their findings with the testing?
Yeah, and the testing piece, and one of the pieces I failed to mention when the question came up earlier, is one of the ways they're trying to address the expansion of testing in this area is actually through Virginia Tech at the Fralin Biomedical Research Institute. And so what their goal is to be able to do 1,000 tests a day out of that facility. And they're slowly working their way up. So like the first week, I think they were doing 50 tests, and then they're working their way. Those tests will still be for those groups that I mentioned previously, first responders, those kinds of things. But what it's doing is that will free up capacity for the Department of Health to actually do more general population kinds of testing. So yes, it is really hand in glove that as that that testing ramps up at Virginia Tech, it creates more capacity for testing with the Department of Health. Then of course, they're also hiring the contact tracers so that they can kind of link those two together. And that, again, that I think would be something that as it advances, definitely would be worth having Molly come and talk at the press conference about sharing what that experience has been and where they are associated with that. And that's true. That's the approach essentially is taking place across the entirety of Southwestern Virginia, not just here locally as well. We just happen to be the host of the Research Institute, just as Blacksburg and Christiansburg are able to actually host Virginia Tech. So they're actually doing the testing in both of those locations as it starts to ramp up. But it's been a fairly slow process to get that underway with them in order to do it. But it has definitely increased over the last several weeks, but they're still moving toward that goal.
Thank you for helping me to connect the dots in my head. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay. Let me just end this by thanking each of you for your work and doing the videos and working with Tiffany Bradbury in getting out and talking and meeting, well, doing the videos. And many of you, I think all of us have done groups or will be doing groups in our community. I had a chance to work with the business people, especially the bigger businesses last Wednesday. And I think everybody attended. There was a good conversation. And they've been very impressed with the way council has been visible and saying doing the videos and talking about the issues as it relates to COVID-19 and the decisions. So I just want to commend you on your efforts. And believe me, it's appreciated by many citizens in our community. All right, with that being said, we're going to.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
members of council, I would ask that if you're prepared to recess, that you recess until 5 o'clock and take up your school board forum, that you defer whether to recess later after that to go into closed session. We will not have enough time to deal with the closed session between now and 5 o'clock, because in a couple of minutes, the school board applicants will be coming into this Zoom meeting. So I would ask that you simply recess this meeting until 5 p.m. I would remind you, and I'm looking at Tiffany and Cece to confirm it, you should mute your computers and turn your video camera off until you come back at 5 o'clock.
Okay. This is an engaged council, Dan. When we get going, it's going. I was watching the clock, but it just kept going that way.
That's making a change in the batting order. That's all we're doing.
All right. Well, with that being said, we will go into recess and reconvene here at 5 p.m. for our school board interviews.
Right. And Mayor, I just point out, with regard to council could be thinking about it, there are 2 of the 7 candidates have withdrawn their applications. So we may be able to complete the forum around 6 o'clock, and that would give us some time to go into the closed meeting afterwards, depending on what happens at this point. The 2 candidates that announced their withdrawals with the city clerk were Katrina Wood and Grace Church.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan. And I'm going to shortly, when we reconvene, I'm going to put this in the hands of Councilwoman Michelle Davis so that she can watch the clock as we go forward, working to our second meeting tonight at 7 o'clock. So with that, we'll be in recess until 5 o'clock. Thank you.
This is Dan Callahan, Roanoke City Attorney. What I'm going to do in just a moment is the mayor, I'll turn this over to the mayor. He will ask the city clerk to take the roll. And then the mayor will do a couple of brief comments and then turn it over to Ms. Davis to go through the process. One of the things the mayor will do will announce all 7 applicants that were received, and this was advertised. But we'll note that 2 of the applicants have withdrawn their applications. So Mayor, you can open the meeting and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Dan, and welcome everybody to us reconvening this session tonight to interview school board applicants. And I will ask our clerk, Ms. Susie McCoy, to please call the roll.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Here.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Here.
Ms. Davis?
Here.
Ms. Osborne?
Here.
Ms. White Boyd?
Here.
And Mayor Lee?
Here. All right, so I'm glad everybody could get back tonight. And tonight we're here to do probably one of the most important assignments that we have and appointments that we have, and we do a number of them, but to listen and to appoint school board trustees, as they're called at times, for school board members. I want to take this time to recognize the applicants, and they are Grace Natasha N. Saunders, James W. Settle, and Katrina R. Wood from contention. So we're just looking at 5 applicants tonight. Let me thank each of you all for your willingness to serve, to get out and serve. This is it's a challenging time, and this is work that we really need people to come in and be committed and And I, as a person that served for 5 years on the school board and one as chairman, I can't think of any higher civic responsibility that you can find is to serve on your local education. So let me this time bring on the person who will conduct our meeting tonight. She'll explain the process and we'll proceed with the form. So I'm honored to bring forth Councilwoman Michelle Davis, who will go forward from this point on. Michelle, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Lee, and thank you to all of our school board applicants who are joining us today. This is the first time that we've ever been able to do a forum with all of the applicants who are choosing to participate, who can really be in front of the council and to have the opportunity to express your viewpoints on what is important to you in a local school board. So the process, each applicant, and again, we have 5 folks who are going to be a part of this forum process this evening. So each of you are going to have time to answer questions. We're going to start the process with an opening statement from each applicant, and you will have 1 minute to respond with an introduction of yourself. Following your 1 minute opening statement, and I'll give you the order in just a second. Following your 1 minute opening statement, you will have 4 questions. And for anyone who's viewing online or on TV, the candidates have not been provided with these questions in advance. Each question, you will have 90 seconds to answer. And I'm going to be keeping time locally here, and I will give you a 15-second warning. 15-second warning. And it'll be verbal, so you won't have to see me in order to know that you're getting that warning. You'll be able to hear it. Is anybody having any difficulty hearing me to start, since that will be an important part? Okay. We do ask that everybody please keep your phones, your devices on mute, and unmute yourself to answer. That goes for council members too. And there will not be any direct back and forth asking of questions from council members directly to our candidates this evening. So we will be relying on the information that you give us in your answers to make decision later on about school board candidates. And the last thing is that you will have a closing statement. You'll have a 2-minute closing statement. And for the purpose of tonight's forum, we're going to go in alphabetical order by last name. We will begin with Mr. Huntz, followed by Dr. Jamison, followed by Ms. Mosley, Ms. Saunders, and Mr. Settle. We'll go in that order for your opening statement, and we're going to go in the same order for your first question. Question number 2, we'll go to Dr. Jamison first, and then follow in alphabetical order with Mr. Huntz going last. Question number 3, Ms. Mosley will answer first, going in alphabetical order. Question number 4, Ms. Saunders will answer first, and the closing statements will be led off by Mr. Settles. Any questions before we get started? Okay, since you have not seen the questions before, we are going to be showing the question on the screen. So can everyone, all of our candidates, see the podium computer screen right now?
Yes.
Great. If anybody cannot see it, please let us know. I will read the question out loud, and I will repeat it 1 time, and you will also see it on the screen. However, after the question has been read and repeated, the question's going to go away so that we can show you answering the question. So my goal is to give everybody the opportunity to write down the question to make sure that you've got it in front of you before going on to the first person to answer. All right, are there any questions before we get started with our opening statements? Hearing none. Mr. Hunt, you have 1 minute for an opening statement. And Tiffany, we're going opening statements first, not a question. There you go. And we'll need to be able to see Mr. Hunt as he does his opening statement, as well as the rest of the candidates. There you go. All right, Mr. Hunt. You have 1 minute for your opening statement, and go ahead and begin.
Thank you, ma'am. I just want to make sure my microphone is able to transmit sound well. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and other applicants. I can tell you that I am absolutely honored to be before you today. I find it very important to serve the community in which you live. To answer some of the required questions, I'd like to tell you that my wife, 2 young children, and I reside at 520 King George Avenue Southwest in Roanoke, in the Highland voting district, where I am qualified and registered to vote. I have had the pleasure of living in the Roanoke Valley since 2012, where I took my first job out of college. And I have lived in Roanoke City since 2016 after moving from the county into the city.
15 seconds.
Where I currently reside, and I look forward to answering all of your questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Next up will be Dr. Jamison, and you may begin.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, Your Honor, Mr. Mayor, and members of City Council. My name is Eli Jamison. My address is 2424 Stanley Avenue, Roanoke, Virginia, 24014. I am qualified and registered to vote in the city of Roanoke. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. Since my appointment to the school board 3 years ago, my work has been incredibly rewarding and challenging in equal measures. I am proud of what we have accomplished and in the direction we are headed, but there is much more we have to do. I look forward to the important work ahead, and I hope you will give me the opportunity to continue to serve. I look forward to responding to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Jamison. Next up for an opening statement, we have Ms. Mosley.
Good evening, Mayor Lee, City Council members, and I'm excited to be on this call tonight with my fellow applicants who are just as compassionate and concerned about our school system as I am. I am a registered voter and qualified to vote. My residence is 2431 Staunton Avenue, Northwest Roanoke, Virginia. I've been a resident of Virginia since I was in kindergarten and attended Grandin Court Elementary. My 3 children were brought up in the Roanoke City public school system as well, have gone on to do some amazing and wonderful things. I'm excited again about tonight and just look forward to learning more and also offering my input as far as the school board is concerned in the city and our young folks and our residents.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Ms. Natasha Saunders. Natasha,
hello, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well this evening. It's a pleasure for me to also be here with you and fellow applicants. I am a Roanoke native, though I've only been back in this area for the last 3 years. My address is 1830 Fremont Circle, Northwest Roanoke, Virginia, 24017, and I am registered to vote in this area as well. My background is in higher education, student development, talent acquisition, and so forth, and I'm very passionate about giving back to youth. And so the reason why I'm here is because I do believe that our school board deserves equal representation, and I'm happy to serve and pour back into our youth in the city.
Ms. Saunders, thank you so much. And last but not least, for an opening statement, Mr. Settles.
Hi, I'm James Settle. I've lived in Roanoke since I was dragged here in the back of a van in 1981, but that was the county. And then when I was able to make my own decisions, I moved into the city. I've been at 929 Winona Avenue for 21 years. I am registered to vote in the city of Roanoke. And I was excuse me, Roanoke City school teacher at James Madison Middle School for 10 years. 2 of them pretty good, 6 of them brilliant, and 2 of them were incredibly difficult. And I'd love to tell you guys about those experiences and what made them what they were. Thanks.
Mr. Settle, thank you so much. And that concludes the opening statements by our candidates. Council members, are there any questions or concerns before we move on to the 4 questions for our forum candidates? Okay. All right, let me reset my clock. We'll be going to 1:30, so you have 90 seconds to answer each of these questions. Again, I will give you a 15-second warning prior to the end of your time, and then you'll hear me telling you that your time is up at the very end. And because we're all in this together, my dog decided that this is the time she wants to bark, and I apologize to everyone in advance. Okay, so we're going to get started with our first question, and Mr. Huntz, again, you will be answering this first question first, and Eli Jamison will be next up, and we'll go in alphabetical order by last name. The first question, and I'll read it to you 2 times. Please describe your experience in working on boards or committees as a part of your work experience or community service with specific focus on team building and developing consensus. So again, our first question, please describe your experience in working on boards or committees as a part of your work experience or community service with a specific focus on team building and developing consensus. And if everyone has that question and has started formulating their answer, we will get started with Mr. Huntz. You have 90 seconds to respond. You may begin.
I am so glad that this question was asked, and I really wish I had about an hour to speak on this topic. So I will try to pack as much into 1:30 as possible. Currently, I'm an employee of Roanoke County, where I serve as a school resource officer at a county middle school. It's the job that I have wanted in law enforcement since the beginning of my career. And throughout that process, I have been able to place myself on many different councils and committees. Most recently, the County Police Department Strategic Planning Committee, where I was tasked with working with other units within the department and coming up with our strategic plan, mission, vision, and values. I've also served on our policy review committee, which was a unique challenge in making sure that we are staying up to times with the current trends in our society and making sure that we adapt and grow to meet those needs. I'll tell you that I also am a military reservist where I serve on my unit's planning board for training, coming up with our long-term training plan, which is a very unique challenge because not only do I have other people who I work directly with, but other specialties that I don't normally speak with. And so it's a very interesting opportunity to bring different minds and ideas together, which is what I like to focus on.
Thank you, Mr. Huntz. Dr. Jamison, you have 1:30. Please describe your experience working on boards or committees as a part of your work experience. You may begin.
Super. So my background in boards and committees spans across PTAs when my children were in Roanoke City Public Schools, to the Presbyterian Community Center, to the South, to the Science Museum here in the city, prior to serving on the school board. Of course, I'm also working on committees within and across Virginia Tech, as well as many, many committees now as a member of the school board. I would say that my role in thinking about team building and consensus crosses over this. That is the primary concern for me in every group and committee that I work on, because the investments and the values and the concerns of the people at the table and ensuring the right people are at that table within your committee are vital to the best answer, as well as the implementation of whatever it is you're trying to work on afterwards. Part of my professional life is as a facilitator, so I find that within these committees, I'm using those skill sets to try and build consensus. I am a big question asker. I try to be a good listener. And these are the
15 seconds
that I really focus on, particularly when the challenges are sticky and big, which has been my experience in the last 3 years.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Mosley, you have 1:30 to describe your experience working on boards or committees, and you may begin.
Thank you. Team building and consensus is really the whole point of focus whenever I take on the role or the responsibility of joining anybody or any team. So in another life, I was a principal in Franklin County, and I participated in numerous committees and numerous teams there, one being the Family Assessment and Planning Team, which actually took a multidisciplinary approach to helping families, not just the students, but their families. And again, team building was a part of that. We actually had to work with the community, with schools, with everyone at large, that in order to make sure that each of these students were successful in their life. As director of the Community Solutions Center on Melrose Avenue, I am involved in numerous committees, numerous teams, and take great pride in that. Personally, I also am a member of my church, the Hill Church Leadership Team, where we are having a focus on multi-generational, multi-ethnic outreach into our community. And so it's not just a religious base, but it's also really literally pouring back into our community, which again requires team building and requires consensus. I'm a member of the Acts 2 ministry. It's an urban youth ministry that reaches out to urban youth. We were focused on Addison. We were focused on Addison most recently, and I also have participated in the Interwoven Equity Committee for Roanoke City for the 20-year plan as well.
Thank you so much. Ms. Saunders, you'll be up next to answer the question describing your experience working on boards or commissions. And you may begin.
Thank you. I truly believe that I've been a visionary in all that I've done with a collective purpose for all. Everything that I've done from community outreach to working in higher education has been to make a collective impact, to make sure that I'm inclusive of everyone. And as my role with Roanoke College as the Director for Multicultural Affairs and other roles that I've held at higher education institutes, I found that I've been the liaison between underrepresented minority groups and the institution. So I have a lot of experience in making sure that I'm representing not only the institution, but the constituents in which we serve. Currently, I serve on the Gun Violence Task Force for the City of Roanoke. I also serve on the Dumas Hotel Legacy Group. I'm the co-founder also of Trifecta Inc., in which everything we do is based on a consensus and team building. And also in all the work that I do in terms of programming and again, working with youth and working with college students, I really believe that you have to have the voice of everyone included at the table, including the ones that you are serving. So I'm really huge on making sure that everything I do is an approach in collaboration and making sure that all voices are heard. So I think that's really important. And I think that it has been very representative of all the work that I've done in the community and in higher
15
education.
seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Settle, you have 90 seconds to answer, to tell us about your experience working on boards or committees. You may begin.
Okay. Yeah, I've been on a lot of those kind of things, civic boards. I was on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. I was the president of the Wasena Neighborhood Forum for 8 years until I was able to trick somebody else into taking it on. And now our board in the neighborhood has been so great at just the way we get things done as a group. It used to be just me as a president kind of doing the heavy lifting. And once I gave up that and became just the treasurer, I was able to be kind of somebody who participates and supporting the president. And I found that really have found that really rewarding, and all of us work together really well. I've done the gamut, the city budget committee. I was on the comp plan in 2000, comp plan in 2020. But the most important team and team building thing I was ever on was the Senators team at James Madison Middle School, where I taught many of your kids. I know Joe was one of my favorites, and I'm not playing favorites. I'm just saying those were great times. And the reason they were great times is because the middle school team was such a key, and we worked as such a group. And so the four of us worked so well together. I try to bring that to every board and commission I'm on.
Thank you, James. Great job staying within your time caps, everybody. I'm really impressed, by the way. You're doing an excellent job. I know this is a lot of information to try and get out in just 90 seconds, so thank you all. All right, so our second question is going to appear on the screen momentarily. You'll again have 90 seconds to answer. This time, Dr. Jamison will be first to answer, following in subsequent alphabetical order, with Mr. Hunt's answering last. So your second question is, we'll get there in a moment. I think we're having, there we go. What role and relationship should a trustee develop and maintain with Roanoke City Council? So again, your second question is, what role and relationship should a trustee develop and maintain with Roanoke City Council? Give everyone a moment. And Dr. Jamison, you'll be going first, and you have 90 seconds. You may begin.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is really a crucial relationship in that it needs to be a partnership. I think one of the things that is really critical to the relationship between City Council and the school board is, at a minimum, a policy of no surprises, and at a maximum of facilitating the conversations that help our families and communities. Because if we're helping our families and our communities, we're helping our children, which is what's pivotal to the school board. I believe that it's really important, for example, when we come together on issues of significance across the city. For example, the building name designation review committee that I chaired on the school board had 2 council members on it, because that was going to impact an entire community. I think when we think about citywide issues, that kind of role of open communication and open questions are a really important relationship to ensure that we are supporting all of our constituencies, because we find all your constituencies in our schools in some way or another. And I think it's really important to have that kind of conversation that's going on.
15 seconds.
With difficult and complex challenges, and they need all of our thoughts at the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jamison. Next up will be Ms. Mosley. Ms. Mosley, you have 90 seconds to tell us about the role and relationship a trustee should develop and maintain with City Council.
Sure.
You may begin.
It is my belief that the role in the relationship should definitely be transparent and professional. I believe that when we come to the table and we have issues and concerns that we need to discuss, that we should be able to openly be able to do that with an open mind and an open heart, with the students, the staff, and this community as the focal point of our discussions and our concerns. It should be also one of mutual respect. Our perspectives may not be the same. However, when we come to the table together, we can put all of that aside, and we can actually just come together for the simple alignment of this system and of our school system and our community.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Ms. Saunders, you're next up with 90 seconds to respond to the question, what role and relationship should a trustee develop and maintain with City Council? You may begin.
Thank you. Well, I definitely am a relationship builder. So I look at each of the members of the city council as stakeholders, and I would like to approach them with a human approach that I think sometimes is lacking in politics. So the first thing I think I would do is reach out and have individual meetings with each person representative of the council to make sure that we have a common understanding, that I get to learn about each person's background and personal beliefs. That way that we have more of a consensus when we're working together to come up with opportunities to benefit the city of Roanoke. I also do agree that we should have a transparency, open dialogue, but I also believe that we should be one front. Within this leadership role, you're going to be representing different entities at all times. And so I think that it's really important to be one front with each other and never show any flaw in our front with each other. So I definitely believe in transparency, relationships, authenticity, and making sure that we're getting time to know each other past politics and past the issues that we have to address as a team.
Thank you so much. Mr. Settle, you will be next with 90 seconds to answer the question, what role and relationship should a trustee develop and maintain with city council? You may begin.
Okay. Yeah, I could just repeat everything everybody else said because everybody said it really well. So it's an advantage to go last or next to last. I could add a few things. Obviously, communication is key. Since such a huge chunk of the city budget goes to the school board directly. So I think just spending that money is important to know how it's spent. And two things that weren't mentioned that I'd like to add. I think public schools are somewhat of an economic development tool. And I think embracing some sort of regionalism between the school systems that surround us, as far as calendar and certain things like that, where teachers and students can kind of have a little bit more confidence that like the calendars aren't going to be 6 weeks apart like they are now between Salem and Roanoke County, things like that. And then probably the biggest, besides the huge budget crunch coming up, hiring a superintendent. Superintendent is just like the city manager of the public schools. So I think everybody needs to get along. And I feel like as long as the superintendent of schools and the city manager are working together, then the two boards can also work together.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Hunt, you will be answering this question in 90 seconds. What role and relationship should a trustee develop and maintain with city council? Mr. Hunt, oh, good. I was going to say, you're still on mute. Good job. You're on top of it. You may begin.
Thank you. I think this is such a unique question because most of the time when people think of trustees' relationships, they think of those relationships with school administrators and not necessarily the council. And so this is an interesting perspective. And a very wise person told me that surprises are only good on Christmas and your birthday. And so that's something that I try to live by. I'm letting there be no surprise that catches people off guard, because in order for the region to succeed, there needs to be a symbiotic relationship between the schools and the city, because the city cannot thrive without the schools and the schools cannot thrive without the city. We also need to make sure that we have unified goals, because another wise man said, a house divided cannot stand. And so if we're pulling in two opposite directions, neither of us will succeed. And then the city or the school system is also responsible for being good stewards of the resources that the city provides and making sure that the product that we are charged with producing is able to then go back and be a benefit for our communities in our city. And so more than a lot of people realize, these two organizations are so intertwined. And so that relationship needs to be one of respect, of trust, of transparency, and one that is mutually beneficial.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. All right, you guys are halfway through. We only have 2 more questions. You're doing a great job. And I did just want to take a moment and thank everyone again for being willing to participate in this format. It's so important to this council that we have full transparency in the decisions we make around school board. And it's so important to this council too, that we have a relationship with our school board members that is productive for everyone here, all of our citizens. And so having this forum where we can really hear from each of you individually is a great opportunity for us to learn more about you. And we're just grateful for your willingness to participate. So thank you all. Question number 3, this one will start with Ms. Mosley. Please identify 2 essential objectives that you hope to accomplish as a school board trustee. So question number 3, starting with Ms. Mosley this time, will be, please identify 2 essential objectives that you hope to accomplish as a school board trustee.
Thank you. The first one that comes to mind would be equity, and that would be equity among all students. I live in a community where some of the students are marginalized or considered marginalized. I live in a community and work and worship in a community where some students and their families may feel forgotten almost. And so one of my direct objectives coming into the school board, if I'm so blessed, would be to really have us as a team, as a collaborative effort, look at all students and look at them equitably and look at the enhancement of resources and access to activities and just making sure that every student has the availability to the valuable education that every other student does. The other would be to make sure that our staff that work within the school system feel supported, feel heard, feel that they have a system that has their back. And those will be 2 of the objectives that I would have going into the school board.
Well, now I can't get myself unmuted. Okay, we got it. Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Great job. The question next goes to Ms. Saunders. Please identify 2 essential objectives that you hope to accomplish. You may begin.
Well, as a proud product of Roanoke City Public Schools, I really hope to give that same energy and pour into others so other students can be excited to be a representation or excited to be a product of Roanoke City Public Schools, especially those that are in our marginalized and underrepresented communities. And so by doing that, I would hope to incorporate 2 objectives, one being more community outreach and connectivity. We see that on a scale, but I would like to see that increase so that students know what's outside of their school system. A lot of times we only have our principals and our teachers pouring into our students, and at times they feel those persons are the only ones that care about them. So the more that we can do more community outreach, engagement, and bringing more people into our school systems, the more they feel there's hope for them outside those walls of being in the school system. Number 2, I really hope to provide more innovative ways, as I mentioned, to pour into youth. I'm excited to be a Fleming graduate, excited to have gone to Roanoke Academy, but some students don't have that sense of pride being that they go to schools in Northwest. So I would like to capitalize on some of the innovative ways people have taught, such as our teachers at Addison and other entities where they're being more innovative. The work that Ebony Jones has done and Ryan Bell has done and Xavier Duckett has done as community constituents and representatives. I would like to see more exciting ways to get students hyped and excited about their future after they graduate.
Thank you so much. And next will be Mr. Settle. Please identify 2 essential objectives you hope to accomplish as a school board trustee. And you may begin.
Okay. I think one, like I was saying before, how economic development and schools go hand in hand, and I would really love to reach out to other school boards and form some sort of regional calendar committee where the schools are not staggered throughout 6 weeks of opening times, and kind of sync up, not adopt the exact common calendar, but have some sort of guidelines where the school boards work together to choose kind of a rough opening window and a rough closing window, so that if you teach in one district and live in another, or even if you're a company coming to do business here, you're not so confused about, like, one school system opens April 10th or August 10th and another one opens in September. And then the biggest thing is to protect public schools, protect the funding, protect the teachers, protect the students. You know, RIF could be in the future here, and I really think there are other ways. I've been through the last crash as a teacher. It was brutal, and we have to figure out a way to keep our teachers sane and happy, so that the students can be the same. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Settle. And next up will be Mr. Huntz to answer the question. Please identify 2 essential objectives you hope to accomplish as a school board trustee. You may begin.
Thank you. In order to give my perspective a little bit more view, I'd like to quickly just say where this perspective comes from. I work in a school every single day, and in that school, my main job is the safety and security of the students, but I've learned that I do so much more than that. I am a teacher, I am a mentor, I am a protector, I'm a friend, and so I've seen with my boots on the ground how the school operates, and so that's where I get the ideas that first I'd like to create an environment that's conducive to learning and building tomorrow's citizen today without jeopardizing future generations' abilities to also have those same resources. By creating what I'd like to call a high quality, sustainable education. The next thing that I do is my bread and butter that I do every day, and that's safety and security. And that can mean so many things. It's such a broad window. I wish I had time to explain it more. But the biggest thing that I've learned after seeing the faces of the students that I come in contact with every day is that they cannot learn if they do not feel safe. And I mean physically safe from not only bullying, but any potential threat that may be there.
15 seconds.
And so my high priority right now is physical safety and security, and giving students an environment where they feel safe to learn.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Dr. Jamison, 90 seconds to respond to 2 essential objectives. You may begin.
Yeah, I would echo Mr. Settle. There's an advantage to going last. All of these ideas are wonderful. To put them specifically into kind of the context. I have a short term and a longer term right off the bat. Right now facing us is this critical moment where we can't afford to fail at addressing education during a pandemic. We have a lot of crises that we have to face, and that's the short term issue that we're addressing right this second. Not only do we have to do it, we have to do it exceptionally well, and the challenges are huge, but we're engaging in those conversations right now. So I would love us to be able to say at the end, whatever is coming to us, that we've done this the best of anybody else in the state. And those are the challenges we're ahead of. Secondarily, and running at the same time, is addressing getting our strategic plan developed, but embedded with what we're calling Equity 2.0. This is an expansion of equity and inclusion. It builds on many of the ideas that my colleagues here have already expanded. The involvement of the community, the involvement and training of our students, the addressing of the very many diverse needs that our urban students that face every day, and embedded in our strategic plan so that for the next 5 years, we are committed to improving equity and inclusion across the city.
15 seconds.
Structural change in the way we govern. I think that includes policies, et cetera. So those would be the 2 things, short and long term.
Thank you. All right, and that's taken us through our 3rd question, and so we're on to our 4th and final question. You guys are doing great. Our last question, and I did receive a text from the council chamber saying that there is still some internet connectivity issues going on, so it's taking them a minute to get the questions up on the screen. So we'll give the internet a moment to catch up. We will be moving on to question number 4, and Ms. Saunders, you'll be the first one to answer this question. Question number 4 asks, what is your perspective of the role of a school board trustee with the superintendent? So again, question number 4, what is your perspective of the role of a school board trustee with the superintendent? And Ms. Saunders, when you're ready to begin. You may begin.
Hello.
Great job.
Thank you. I believe that our role as trustees with the superintendent, one, as I mentioned before, is to be one sound voice despite what tensions may be happening behind scenes and getting the collaborative work done. We need to be one force, one body at all times. I also believe that it is my job to operate in the superintendent's blind spots. And what I mean by that is we all operate out of our lens when it comes to culture, diversity, socioeconomic issues that may plague our community. So I want to be able to operate in the blind spot of our superintendent by making sure that I'm a voice again for our marginalized communities, our students as a whole. Number three, excuse me, I also believe that I can assist in developing pivot strategies along with our superintendent. And what I mean by that is COVID-19 is a perfect example of how our Roanoke City Public Schools had to pivot and be able to provide curriculum and education for our students in a virtual manner. And I have done so with my work at Roanoke College, with my work with Trifecta, and with other outreach opportunities that I am venturing at this time as well. So I think it's really important to be able to operate in the blind spots of your superintendent, also make sure that you're one front with your superintendent, but also come up with innovative ways to engage our students and our parents and our community at large with pivot strategy.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Saunders. Next up will be Mr. Settle to answer the question about how you view the role of the school board trustee and the superintendent.
Wow, that's the big one. Well, the school board hires a superintendent, and while they don't do personnel issues, they do somewhat supervise the superintendent. They need to disagree with the superintendent at times and not just be a rubber stamp, even when the numbers are going in the right direction. And I think the trustees need to be able to tell the superintendent that maybe it's time that they move on and it's time to end a contract. Even if the next thing out there, it's scary because, the next one, you have to train them, break them in and so on and get them up and running. But I do think that is a tough role, but it has to be done to make sure that the superintendent is responsive, is fresh, has good ideas, and reports to their board.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Settle. All right. Next up will be Mr. Huntz to answer the question of what you feel the relationship should look like between a trustee member and the superintendent. You may begin.
I'm glad this question arose as well, because I referenced this earlier. This is the more publicly viewed relationship that people typically see. And I think the main priority here is that the school board trustees need to make sure that they are hiring the correct person for the job. That is their main goal. And the superintendent is the professionally trained administrator, in essence, the CEO running the ship, whereas the the school board trustees provide the oversight, the priorities, the goals, and guide the administrators. But day-to-day operations, I believe, should be left with the professionally trained administrators. I believe there should always be a two-way communication and transparency, the same way as there needs to be transparency between the council and the board of trust or the school board trustees. But there also needs to be potentially a slight differing of opinions, because if everyone is on the same page, thinking the same way, the groupthink leads people to not be able to think of new and innovative ideas. And so while I don't anticipate there being big disagreements and arguments, sometimes that differing of opinion and thought is what really brings you to seeing a new solution to a problem. So that's my thought on that relationship.
Thank you. Mr. Huntz, next up will be Dr. Jamison. How do you view the role between a school board trustee and the superintendent? You may begin.
Well, first and foremost, the role of the school board is governance. So we can't lose sight of that. But it is it's a governance that is in partnership with the leader of your organization, who is the superintendent. So it is critically important to have open communication, to develop trust with your superintendent, to ensure that you are asking hard questions in private, and to ensure that the voices of all your communities are showing up in these decisions that impact our system. So as a board of trustee, it is ensuring that the policies and the structures that affect the whole system are communicated and questioned and challenged in our operations and our governance role, and the implementation that we can trust one another enough through communication and the development of policies and relationships, et cetera, that we can ensure that your chief executive is in fact running the ship in the direction that that is envisioned on behalf of your community. It is an interesting relationship to navigate, but it is critical that we have an ongoing line of communication and the building of trust between the two bodies so that you can have hard conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Mosley, you're up next. Answer the question on how you view the relationship between the school board trustee and the superintendent. You may begin.
Thank you. I go back to what I said about the relationship between council as well. It must be transparent and it must be one of mutual respect. It is also, I believe, a collaborative relationship. To be a trustee that is able to hold the superintendent accountable to the mission, vision, and strategic goals that have been set forth. I'm assisting the superintendent by being visible within the community and carrying out the strategies and communicating that to the people. I feel that we are also in an advisory role in relation to the superintendent, offering guidance, support, and oversight. And finally, working through tough and challenging conversations and hard times together collaboratively. And that's what I feel.
Thank you. And Natasha, you answered this question first, correct? Make sure I've got my order correct. Correct. And then that leaves us with our closing statements today. So before we go into closing statements, Council, I will ask one more time, is there anything else? Do you feel that there's anything that needs to be added to the discussion prior to closing statements? Again, without asking direct questions of the folks themselves, is there anything else that you all see in this process that we need to take care of prior to closing statements? All right, hearing none, we'll go on to closing statements. Mr. Settle, we'll start with you and move back through the roll. You have 2 minutes for your closing statement. So please tell us anything about yourself and about your perspective that you haven't been able to tell us so far. And I will again give the 15-second warning, but you do have 2 minutes for your closing statement. So you've got a little bit more time if there's any additional information you'd like to give. And Mr. Settle, you may begin.
Okay, are you there?
Yep.
Okay, hold on, somebody's trying to call me. Let me X that out. All right, okay. So bottom line, public schools are a public good, just like police, fire, roads, defense, anything that is, everybody chips in, and it's one thing that we all work on together. I know people have different ideas of what that thing might be, but I really think it's very important to protect our public schools, obviously from underfunding, also from corporate interests that want to fracture our system into weird patchwork of school choice and charter schools. Luckily in Roanoke, we've been able to avoid that. I think our neighborhood schools are really important not only to the students and the people who work there, but to the neighborhoods themselves. The neighborhood school is the basis of that community, and it's so much more than just a place to send your kids. And some of the other candidates have said all the great ways that schools can outreach in their community. So when a school loses its when a neighborhood loses its elementary school, that can be a big blow to the community. So neighborhood schools are very important to me. Also, it's very important to protect our employees. I worked in the county for 5 years at Cave Spring, enjoyed it very much, but it was dirty every day because the janitorial services had been farmed out. And every time you farm something out to save
15
money,
seconds.
you lose somewhere else. And I remember when I worked at Madison, we had career housekeeping, and our school was sparkling every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Settle. Next up, we'll have Mr. Hunt with your 2-minute closing statement.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to say I'm honored to be in front of you today. I really appreciate your time. I wish I had the ability to speak with you all day, but since that's not a possibility at this moment, I'll just close by saying my entire career has been serving the public through public safety as my full-time job, specifically in the schools, and as a veteran of the armed forces, serving in another capacity. So that's been my passion. I've also been blessed enough to be a mentor at Hope Tree for underprivileged students and travel the world to different orphanages and be able to see different cultures and how things are done. And so I really do enjoy being able to give back to the community, and I found that is my purpose. Just to close, I have 2 young children who within the next half a decade will be growing up and going to school themselves, and I want to make sure that I am providing an environment where they can succeed, not only in the classroom, but also in the community. I want to make sure that the same opportunities that I had are available to all the students who are out there today, tomorrow, and 10 years from now. And I want to make sure that not only are we providing the best quality education, but also being proper stewards of our community, because they're the ones who are trusting us to go out there and do our job well. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Dr. Jamison with your closing statement. You have 2 minutes.
All right. Importantly, I believe there's just nothing more important than a robust public school education system. Frankly, the preparedness and well-being of our children through excellence in public education is the foundation of a vital future, not just for our city, but for our state and our nation. I've dedicated the last 20 years of my career to working in public universities, and the last 3 working for our K-12 public schools. As a school board trustee and as assistant professor of practice at Virginia Tech, I get to work in an educational ecosystem dedicated to improving the lives of students of all ages, from all kinds of environments, and at every stage of their educational journey. And the importance of this work is humbling, and the duty to get it right is essential. When I applied 3 years ago, I did so with a belief that I have the skills and experience that could fill a gap in an already talented school board team. I believed, and I still believe, that my professional background, along with my experiences as an educator, a researcher, and administrator, provide necessary perspectives in our board deliberations. Since joining the board, I've put that belief to the test by serving on 5 different standing board committees. I chaired the ad hoc building name designation review committee, and I've initiated the transfer knowledge committee team that's working to ensure an effective superintendent transition that's in process. Presently, I am leading the reopening task force with Dr. Bishop, where we're developing plans to address the multitude of contingencies that we are facing with trying to educate our children in the era of COVID-19. If reappointed, I will continue to my work in the Equity Task Force to embed an embed an expansive approach to equity and inclusion called Equity 2.0 into our next strategic plan. Thank you for your trust and confidence that you've placed in me for the past 3 years, and I pledge to continue to honor that trust and confidence if reappointed. Thank you for your time.
Whew. Great job. Right in the buzzer. All right. And next up for our closing statement will be Ms. Mosley. And you may begin when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Good to go.
Thank you. As we begin to go into this new school year, we're embarking upon what we will do to ensure the safety, the health, the mental wellness of our youth and our staff. And those issues are imperative and they're urgent. And so how we as a community go forth, and it will take an interdisciplinary approach to ensuring that each of our children has that access to everything that they need to start off the school year and to maintain during the school year. When I started the school in Franklin County for students with disabilities, it was a one-room old carpet store that had been shut down for years. And I stepped into that building, and many people who were working with me didn't see the vision. They couldn't understand. But what I took from that one-room carpet store was that no matter where or what you have, if your heart is for children, if you have a compassion for families, if you truly, truly, truly want to see people succeed and to live their lives and thrive, you take that one student at a time. You take that one family at a time. And that's what I did. And that's how I took the school from a one-room carpet store to a K through 12 accredited program in 10 years. The first of those I did alone. After that, I was able to actually get funding for staff. And so I bring with me that same heart, that same drive, that same compassion, that same desire to hear from parents and families who are struggling in any kind of way and figure out what we can do individually and what we can do together to make sure that they have the supports and what they need in order to thrive and in order for their student to thrive. We work with students in and day out. And we knew when they went home, they would still face some barriers and we would have to start all over the next morning when they came in. But we were willing to do that. And that's the same, again, that's the same heart and compassion that I have for this community. And that's the heart and compassion that I have for youth. And I would love to be able to bring that to the school board. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And Ms. Saunders, last but not least, with your 2-minute closing statement, you may begin.
Thank you. I just want to close up by saying that I am definitely passionate about people and I'm passionate about our youth. And anyone who could vouch for me knows that I'm more passionate about people than I am politics. But however, there comes a time where you have to position yourself to be able to make the greater impact that you want. As a person who really believes in making a difference, if I were given this opportunity, I just know that I would be with it with the full intention to make a transformational difference with this school board and not just transactional, by making sure that we work together collaboratively, that we are making a difference in the community, that again, I would like that this macro level of leadership would lead to the micro level of making sure that every student feels like we see them. With my background in youth development and working with college students, the most important thing that I can say is that our students need to feel validated and that we see them. And so with my experience in one-on-one coaching and working with our youth, I would hope that this platform would allow us to make sure that we are looking at various different ways to make sure that our students, again, are feeling that sense of pride that some of our youth are lacking, especially from our school systems, representative of the Northwest, Southeast areas of our community. So again, I want to work with this team of people to make sure that we are looking at equitable ways to make sure that we're transforming our community and getting our youth ready for the next level post high school. I want to make sure that the same way that I recognize that people were pouring into me, that people recognize that people are pouring into them and that do care about them. And sometimes it just takes that one conversation to make them realize they have more than they thought they had. So that is the reason why I am running for this school board opportunity. And I would just like to, again, say that I'm here to make transformational change and here to work collaboratively with our community and our stakeholders.
Excellent. Well, that wraps all of our panelists and our discussion for today. The candidates for school board have all had an opportunity to speak, and I see Ms. Osborne is at the bottom of the screen clapping. You guys did an excellent job. Thank you so much for being willing to embark on this adventure with us as council. It was so important to us to hear from all of the candidates this year. And I think, you know, there's small blessings of the crisis that we're facing. It is causing us all to be very innovative. And through this online platform, we were able to have everybody who chose to be with us this evening to speak and to be heard, not only by council, but by the entire public. So we appreciate you all tremendously. And with that, Mayor Lee, I'll turn it back over to you to wrap everything up. Mayor Lee, you're still muted. Hold on. We can't hear you yet.
She doesn't have it on mute.
There we go. You got it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Davis, for a good job. Thank you for directing this forum. I want to thank all of the applicants or candidates, you recall both names, but thank all of you again for your willingness to serve. I was really impressed with a lot of things that you're doing, and we look forward to making this appointment. As I said earlier, it's a very important appointment for us as a council because our schools are so important, and we're facing some challenging times, and so we're proud. We're proud of our school system and what they've done, and we want to make sure that those that we appoint are ready to step in and go to work. And I was impressed with each of you tonight. So thank you. God bless you. And we'll be making a decision on this probably between now and June 1st. So thank you and have a good evening.
Hey, Mayor Lee, this is Dan Callahan. And the members of the applicants can remain while I say this. The council has two choices now. You can recess until your 7 o'clock public hearing, your session at 7 o'clock, or you can recess and go into your closed session. I know you've had a long afternoon, and my matter can be presented on June 1st if you don't. I would also point in the decision on the school board trustees would be made at one of your next meetings, either June 1st or June 15th. The public hearing is this evening with regard to the school board trustees. But council's choice if you guys would like to go into a closed meeting, but I know it's been a long, so if you prefer not to, just recess this meeting until 7 o'clock. If you prefer to go into the closed meeting, just recess and we'll go to the closed meeting. You would do that by telephone.
Well, Mayor, if I might, this is Mr. Mayor. This is Bill Vespich. I would really prefer to have a break at this point, and depending on how many speakers we have at our public hearing, we can decide. If there aren't very many, perhaps we want to have the closed session with Mr. Callahan this evening. Otherwise, if it's no problem putting it off to the 1st, we can do that as well. But I could really use a break at this point.
All right. Do other council members concur?
Yes.
All right. Hearing none, let's go and take a break, and then we'll get prepared for our session at 7 o'clock, and then we'll decide from there if we want to take up the closed session with Mr. Callahan, or we can come back and do it at June 1st. And so let's just now recess, go back into recess, and we'll come back at 7. Is that okay with everyone?
Yep. Thank you all.
All right.
Great.
Thank you. All right.
Great job, everybody. Thank you so much.
Members of council, remember, just all you have to do is turn off your video and mute your computer until 7 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now live. Mayor Cobb, Vice Mayor Cobb, could you unmute so that we can hear you? Thank you. Mayor, open the meeting, please.
All right. Roanoke City Council session for May 18, 2020 at 7 o'clock p.m. is hereby called to order. And our agenda is scheduled for tonight. Let me just say participation by electronic communication pursuant to Amendment 28 to House Bill 29, Section 2.2-3708.2, Code of Virginia, as amended, ordinance number 41703, 032720, and resolution number 4174-032720. I will ask our clerk, Ms. Susie McCoy, to please call the roll.
Ms. Bestfitch,
Here.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Here.
Ms. Davis,
Here.
Ms. Osborne,
Here.
Ms. Price, Ms. White Boyd,
Here.
and Mayor Lee.
Here. And all 6 members are here. Ms. Price will not be with us this afternoon. So 6 members are present by electronic communication means, and I declare that a quorum is present as permitted by Amendment 28 to House Bill 29, Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3708A and 15.2-1413. If he doesn't mind, I'm going to ask our Vice Mayor to do the invocation tonight, and I will follow him with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would, Vice Mayor, would you do our invocation?
Certainly. Thank you. Let us pray. Gracious God and loving Spirit, as we listen to the rain falling outside, we are grateful for those things that refresh our lives and our minds and our bodies and our souls. We thank you for the spirit of generosity present in our city and in our region. How we are all looking out for each other, listening to one another, caring for one another, and supporting one another. In whatever way of life we find ourselves, we all feel vulnerable, and we all want to feel safe and secure. And so tonight we thank you for all of those who are part of our community, who help us feel safe. Our mask makers, our healthcare workers, our transit drivers, our first responders. We thank you for our households, for our families, for those among us who are reaching out to care for the most vulnerable in our community. We all matter, we're all important, and we're all in this together. And we thank you that through our resilience, we are finding a way forward to build a better future and to keep that promise of love and goodness alive within all of us. Be with us during our meeting tonight. Watch over everyone. We extend a special prayer to our colleague, Ms. Price, who can't be with us tonight. And we thank you for all of our city staff and the extraordinary efforts they're going to, along with all of our business owners and everyone who's going the extra mile. For everyone, we give you thanks. And for your love that sustains us, we give you thanks. In your holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right, if you join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag
Of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with
liberty
and
justice for all.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor. And let me welcome everybody back tonight for our 7 p.m. session. Tonight's council meeting will be televised live and replayed on RVTV Channel 3 on Thursday, May 21st at 7 o'clock p.m. and Saturday, May 23rd at 4 o'clock p.m. and video stream through Facebook Live at facebook.com/Roanoke VA. Council meetings are offered with closed captioning for the hearing impaired. Each member of council has access through the Zoom meeting platform and can participate in this proceeding. The city has provided the public with information to allow the public access to observe this regular session through live broadcast on RVTV, live streaming on Facebook, and posted on YouTube. The city has provided notice of this agenda and process to the public on Thursday, May 15th, 2020. City staff, including the city manager, city clerk, city attorney, and technical staff, are present in the council chamber and are participating in this regular session. To facilitate the process today, to ensure that all council members and the public can follow these proceedings, I ask that whenever a member speaks, including making a motion, to first state the member's name and then make the motion or second. To facilitate, at this time, I ask members whether they have any questions about this process. If not, I'll ask the city manager to advise if he has any comments. All right, the first item on the agenda today is a public hearing. We receive, at this time, the council has received views of citizens regarding appointments of 2 Roanoke City School Board trustees for 3-year terms of office, each commencing on July 1st, 2020. The candidates for consideration are Justin A. Hunt, Elizabeth C.S. Jameson, Cheryl M. Mosley, Natasha N. Saunders, and James W. Settle. Catherine Woods and Grace K. Church did not interview. They dropped out earlier. I'm going to open the public hearing, and so the candidates for consideration again I've just named, so we can hear from those who want to come and share with us their support or comments on James Hunt, Elizabeth Jameson, Cheryl Mosley, Natasha Saunders, and James Settle. And in order to avoid citizens an opportunity to provide comments on city council during the COVID-19 pandemic disaster, citizens wishing to address the council during the regular session of city council conducted by electronic communication means were instructed to sign up by emailing or calling the city clerk's office at clerk@Roanoke VA, phone number 540-853-2541 by 4 p.m. on May 18th. Those citizens who have signed up to speak before the council have been provided the Zoom meeting information and will be allowed to join the meeting and address city council by electronic communication meeting. At this time, I'll ask the clerk, do we have any citizens that have come to speak tonight on our school board candidates?
Mayor Lee and members of council, this is Dan Callahan, Roanoke City Attorney. Wanted to clarify one point just to confirm. Mayor, I believe you said you opened the public hearing, but you are opening the public hearing to hear the comments with regard to Justin A. Hunt, Elizabeth C.S. Jameson, Cheryl M. Mosley, Natasha N. Saunders, and James W. Settle. For the benefit of the public, we advertised 2 additional names on Friday, May 8, Grace K. Church, and Katrina R. Wood. Both Ms. Church and Ms. Wood notified the clerk's office that they have withdrawn their applications, and so that you have 5 candidates to consider tonight. Mayor, so you please just indicate that you confirm that you are opening the public hearing.
Okay, I am opening the public hearing. I thought I said that.
That's what I thought too, but there was a little bit of discrepancy here, but we just want for the benefit of the public. And now the clerk will advise the council of any speakers.
All right, Madam Clerk, Could you advise us of any speakers that are?
There are no speakers to speak regarding the appointment of the Roanoke City to the Roanoke City School Board trustees. No speakers tonight.
All right, with that being done, then I will go ahead and close the public hearing. We will move forward. And with that, I would move the council recess and go.
Mayor, this is Dan Callahan again. Just for the public record, the appointment of the school board trustees will be made by council at a subsequent meeting. The subsequent meetings are either June 1st or June 15, 2020. At this time, Mayor, under your calendar, you have a opportunity for public comment, and the clerk can advise you if any citizens have signed up to speak at public comment under section B.
All right. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers who signed up to speak?
No, Mayor, no speakers are signed to speak during the hearing of citizens upon public matters. No speakers.
Well, Ms. Callahan, with that, we're going to close the public hearing.
There was no public hearing on that one matter. That was just your courtesy you provide to citizens to speak. At this point, if council is so inclined, you have authorized a closed meeting on my request. And if the council were inclined, we could recess to go into closed meeting. That would be a closed meeting conducted by telephone only. So you would mute your computers and turn off your cameras and go to a separate room and call into the number that I provided you. And then we can come back and certify the closed meeting, and then you can recess until the 28th. If that's my expectation, Mr. Mayor, is that this is a meeting that would last, a closed meeting that should last 10 to 15 minutes.
All right. Well, we will now go into closed meeting, we'll recess and return into a closed meeting that we had scheduled this afternoon. So with that, then we'll be recessed.
Right. We'll
Thank you.
Talk to you in a few minutes. You've got the phone number. Thank you. Order.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to order, and after our closed session, I need a motion for us to come out of closed session.
I move that each member of Roanoke City Council certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Chapter 37 of Title 2.2 Code of Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting conducted through electronic communication means was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the public body.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Ms. Osborne?
Aye.
Ms. White-Boyd?
Aye.
And Mayor Lee?
Aye. Thank you all. Well, the council meeting will stand in recess until Thursday, May 28th, 2020, in the council chamber for the purpose of conducting public hearings on the City of Roanoke recommended fiscal year 2020-2021 budget at 7:00 p.m. Proposed real property tax increase at 7:10 p.m. and the recommended 2020-21 HUD funds budget and 2020-2021 annual update to the 5-year consolidated plan at 7:20 p.m. all on May 28th. And we would do that I don't think we'll be in council chambers doing that. We'll do it through our Zoom connection at that time. All right, if there's any further business, come before council. All right, we'll consider this meeting, will be in recess until May 28th. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Bob.